Hello everyone. If you are new to my channel, then consider liking and subscribing. It will make me feel wonderful if you do it, thanks. By the way, I also have a Luffy fan fiction channel. If you are interested, the link is in the description. Lost One by Hyperguy. I've walked this world for ages, watching as history played itself out in front of my eyes. Sometimes I would play role in its direction, but often I'd stay on the sidelines. Now a more serious threat threatens to wipe out all of humanity, and I must now play a role in its survival. If there are any humans left to save, I don't own anything. Adios.
Chapter 1. Outsider XXXXX. I felt so tired for such a long time. Memories blurred together in a congested mixture of fuzz and shades. My eyesight was blurry, but my instincts remained intact. Every movement kept me alive. Every kill meant more time for me to live. These massive creatures, these titans, were colossal and chased me wherever I went. No matter the place, whether it be deep in the humid jungles, high up on the snow-capped mountains, or across the golden plains, these massive human-like creatures continued to follow me endlessly. The power that once helped me save the world has since developed into a curse that gave me prolonged life, decaying away as the endless sands of time moved ever forward. When I ask myself, how long has it been since my friends passed away, my mind only sees blurs. Names passed through my head like water from a waterfall, their faces long since disappearing from the captions of my mind. I knew I had close friends when my life first began. I knew that I would have done anything for them, even sacrifice my life if it came to it. I knew that I was betrayed by my rival and best friend. But as I stated before, their faces, their names, everything about them had been drained from my brain. Why would I forget about the events that had transpired so long ago? An event that I played such a crucial role in shaping? I can't remember what I did, but I know it was important to those close to me and the direction the world was going to take. Since then I exchanged hands with many people. Some good, some evil. At first I cared of the direction of how the world would be shaped, but slowly I began to remove myself from the eyes of the masses. My name, my image, my message, became that of a myth. A distant memory that eventually pattered out from the population's minds. Forgotten. I found love in the distant blurs and hate in others, but one thing rang true throughout my painful mind. The emotions and bonds I made with my many friends and enemies throughout the ages continued to last. I remember the anger I felt when a friend was killed in front of me. I remember the love I felt when I found someone that cared for me, and the anguish when they died of old age. The pain and love remained, even if their faces and names did not. Boom, they are close, and I must keep moving, lest they finally catch me unprepared. I slowly rose to my feet and looked down at the fire that blazed away in the middle of the massive forest. The black ink that painted the edges of the fire moved to and fro, dancing with the fire as its embers flowed up into the air. The bag that was leaning against the massive tree next to me was soon flung over my shoulder and I was on my way once more. Bouncing from tree to tree, using an ancient power stored in my body to empower my legs to move forward, I continued forward, never stopping. At most I would be able to get 2 to 3 hours of sleep, and even less to scavenge up a meal, but since the Titan's appearance, the animals of the world had begun growing accustomed to the lack of humans, making them easy prey. Boom boom, they were getting closer, but I've learned that if I stay at a high enough altitude then all they could do was watch from below and claw at the base of the trees. I glanced over my shoulder and saw the lumbering figures enter into the clearing where my fire was illuminated. The light played off of their pink skin as a rather large one stepped onto the fire, immediately cutting off the source of light and blanketing the area in darkness once again. But I managed to get a good look at the Titan before it disappeared into the blackness of the night. "You know it's impossible to keep running, little one," the massive hulking Titan remarked. I turned my back to the massive creature and continued moving. I knew that as long as I had chakra in my body then they would have an incredibly hard time catching me. But even still, this particular Titan has been chasing me for such a long time, and in the beginning, I knew I was safe as long as the moon was out. But when this one found me, I've had to work harder to stay hidden. Nights once again became my enemy. "How long has it been since I first found you? 1 year, 2 years, 10 years? I can't really remember the exact time, but your body has not aged one bit. Now why is that?" the Titan questioned, his voice echoing throughout the forest. "You truly are a strange human with even stranger abilities." In the beginning, I had tried helping some of the humans escape the Titan attack, killing hundreds upon hundreds of the massive creatures, but all the humans under my protection perished, devoured by the massive beasts that continue to hunt me day in and day out. "Come now, why not sit down and have a chat? I would at least like to hear your voice." I've never said a word to it, but I could tell that the language it used derived from what the humans had used before they were all killed. Was I the last human alive? I don't know. I've traveled across this world since the outbreak and everywhere it has been the same. Not a single human remained, but the buildings, and what was inside, continued to sit idly, decaying as time went on. Never before had I seen such a genocide, and never one that targeted all of humanity. Well, I shall see you soon, I suppose, if you are going to continue running away like a monkey in the jungle. But you know, the Titan said, making me stop on a branch and look in its direction. Even though I couldn't see it, or its smaller friends that chased me, I could visualize its body behind the trees. You're getting awfully close to that place. That place? What was it talking about? I shook my head and jumped to the next branch. It has done nothing but try and coax me into stopping and talking. Where it would then try to eat me, or let its friends kill me. It has vocalized its anger towards my back many times over, knowing that I had escaped its grasp one too many times. But what if this place was real, if it actually existed? I shook my head again, trying not to get my hopes up. My imagination was getting the best of me. The talking Titan never said what this place was, or if it was friendly towards me. Still, it's not like I had anywhere else to go. I might as well look around the area before moving on. XXXXX. It has been 2 weeks since I began my search for this place that the Titan, accidentally, slipped from its mouth, and all I've seen is more Titans. This area in particular seems to be far more dense with the hulking creatures than anywhere else that I've been. During all of my travels, this area is clearly the victor in numbers. This fact only pushed me further. There was something here, but what was it? I couldn't even begin to understand why it let that information slip. Did he do it on purpose, or was it an accident? He had to do it on purpose. It was smart, intelligent to a certain degree. It has shown its cunning many times before. Was this just another trap? A ploy to keep me in the area? Maybe, but I had to take that risk. I stopped on top of a rather large tree and took in my surroundings, and there in the distance was a massive wall. It was gray, and extremely large, larger than any tree nearby. A wall? I thought before jumping out into the field and began making my way towards the wall. It took me about an hour from my position on the tree branch to make it to the side of the wall, and I had to avoid a few Titans along the way, but here it was. It's massive, larger than any Titan I've seen up to this point. I moved my hands across it, just to make sure it was real, but then a thought ran through my head. Who made this wall, and why was it unmanned? It wasn't made by Titans, that much could be deduced. They neither have homes, nor a reason to erect such massive defenses. Defense? It must be humans. A wall of this magnitude must have been their last desperate attempt to avoid extinction, but that still didn't explain why it was unmanned. Surely no mindless Titan could breach such a massive wall on its own. I looked up the massive construct how much chakra would be needed to make it up its side. Quite a lot was my ending conclusion. I looked around me and found that a few Titans had found out where I was. I nodded my head and began running up the side of the wall. The Titans that saw me earlier were standing beneath me, staring at me with those strange faces, waiting to see if I'd fall back down to them. I would not. I shot past the crest of the wall and landed onto the top of the wall with a silent thud. I looked back and forth to see if there was anyone on the wall. I was solemnly disappointed as I picked myself up from my kneeling position. It was almost immediately clear to me that no life had been to the tops of these walls in years. Abandoned equipment straight across the top of the wall, left in probably a mix of fear and terror. Was this wall abandoned? If so, why? No Titan could have scaled this massive structure. Was it breached somehow? I looked out across the massive swath of land that lay within the massive walls. The walls must be extremely long if they continued on past my eyesight. I walked over to the ledge that faced towards the inside of the wall and looked over the edge. More Titans. Somehow they had managed to get inside the walls, but how? I suppose it doesn't really matter. They're here, and inside the wall, which means any hope of human civilization was gone along with the Titans. What now? Surely any prospect of human civilization had disappeared along with the arrival of their predators. I rubbed the back of neck and began walking across the top of the wall. Which direction did I arrive here from? South, east. Yes, the southeast. I sighed heavily as I made my way across the top of the wall towards the southern end of the wall. Why was I even still here? Clearly all humans here had been killed, but I reserved some small amount of hope. What if there was more to the wall than what met the eye? I looked up into the sky and saw that it was going to become night soon, which meant less Titan activity. But did I even have to worry about them reaching me all the way up here? I checked my chakra reserves. Plenty. So, with plenty of chakra, I pushed on towards the southern edge of the wall. If anything, this was a fascinating sight. This wall must have been abandoned only years before my arrival, meaning this was probably the last bastion of hope for all of humankind. Which would also mean that I'm the last human in existence. No, I couldn't believe that. Even if the humans here were wiped out, then I'm sure there was another holdout of humans, right? That's what I kept telling myself all these years, at least. XXXXX, so that's how they got in. It's been about 5 hours since I began walking the crest of the wall until finally I came across something. A city that has had its gates smashed in on both the inside and the outside. No normal Titan could have done this. I scanned out across the city, searching for any source of life, but, as expected, there was none. I now stood on the inside wall and directly over the hole that had been blown inwards towards the heartland. What a shame. I turned towards the heartland behind the walls. I knew that if I continued towards the center then I would come in contact with more titans, but I had to investigate. If there was even the smallest chance that there was any survivors then I had to take that chance. XXXXX, man. This job is so boring, a young man exclaimed as he carried a box across the top an enormous wall. Will you shut your mouth already, Connie? This is the second day we've been up here and all you've done is complain, another soldier shouted in passing. But there's nothing to do. We've cleaned up everything, every cannon, every rail, even the wall itself. This area is spotless, you know this to be true, the bald-headed soldier replied in anger. All we've done is transport cargo from one side of the wall to the other, I swear I've moved the same box at least 4 times now. Our main job is watch for titans. This busy work is only to keep us awake, a third young man explained calmly. I know that Eren, but it's still annoying, Connie mumbled as he continued walking. Eren sighed and looked out over the vast fields, south of the wall. Lands long lost to the titan horde that streamed into the hole in Wall Maria, made by the colossal titan and the armored titan. Eren watched as Connie walked away, clearly still agitated at them being the ones having to complete all the busy work. He sighed and began scrubbing the side of the massive barrel. The gray clouds, at the very least, gave them some reprieve from the scorching sun that would normally blanket them with its radiating rays. Looks like it's about to rain, Eren said to himself as he glanced up at the gray clouds. The distant boom of thunder promised to bring blessed rain to the farmers, but only served to make their lives far more miserable. It does, and I'm already hungry, a female voice shouted from the other side of the cannon. Another boom echoed out across dark sky. It must have been about, 11 in the morning. Sasha, please, you just had a snack like 30 minutes ago, and lunch is just around the corner. You can survive until then, Eren said with an agitated expression. But I can't. I'm so hungry, Sasha exclaimed. Eren's eye twitched slightly as Sasha grabbed her stomach and began rolling on the ground. Why'd they pair me with her of all people? Eren thought before yet another boom rang out, but this one closer than the last. Eren stood up and walked over to a wooden locker that was bolted into the wall. He unlocked said locker and removed 2 wool trench coats from inside. Sasha. The girl looked over at the black-haired boy just in time to see a brown boat slamming her in the face. Put that on. It's about to rain. Did you have to throw it at me so hard? Sasha grumbled as she put on the coat along with her partner. Are we about done here? Eren sighed and shook his head. Sasha, we are to clean all of the cannons on this section of the wall. Sasha's eyes widened in realization, but that means we are only halfway through. The young adult nodded before looking at the wall that surrounded Trost. This is one of the most important parts of Wall Rose, and it's our job to clean the artillery on top of it. Don't take this lightly. Sasha pouted and returned to cleaning the massive artillery piece. You're no fun. Your definition of fun is eating all day, Eren replied as he walked over to the cannon. True to his words, rain began to fall on the pair. The water falling from the sky was not very heavy, but still enough to quickly soak anyone unlucky enough not to have on a wool coat. It's beginning to come down hard, Sasha said as she pulled the hood over her head, Eren following suit soon after. Yeah, we can't really clean the artillery if it begins to pick up anymore, Eren said as he stood up. Sasha, go report to the commander. See if he wants us to continue cleaning, or wait until the rain lets up. Why should I do it? Sasha asked in annoyance. Do you want to stand up here and get wet? Eren asked, but this still didn't get through to her. His eye twitched slightly, or get a snack. Sasha immediately perked up when she heard the word, snack. I'll be right back, Sasha shouted in delight before disappearing from sight. Eren sighed and looked out across the fields in front of the wall. So far everyone's just been doing simple jobs such as this, but others, like Mikasa, were beginning to come into the spotlight of the high officials. They saw how strong she was, how powerful she was. Eren sighed again and looked down at his hands. I've come so far, and here I am. 5th in my class. Any normal soldier would be proud, but, he thought as the soaked soldier clenched his hands into fists. I'm not. There's still so much to learn, like. Boom. Eren jutted his head upwards in the direction of the loud noise, expecting to see a lightning strike hit nearby, but there was nothing in the sky. He then looked down and saw something horrifying. A man, wearing a black cloak that went down to his shins, burst out of the trees about 10 miles away from the gate. He was running at an extremely fast speed, faster than anyone he's ever seen. I said, "Hey, human, what's he doing outside of the walls?" Eren thought, but his thoughts ended there when 3 titans, about 9 meters tall, exploded out of the brush behind him. Shit, 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 what do I do? Eren looked down at his gear. He could go down and try to save the poor guy, but could he fight against 3 titans? Once he was down there, then his 3D maneuver gear would be helpless, because they were now entering a valley that had no trees within it. The young soldier clenched his hands as he watched the titans chasing after the poor man in both sorrow and anger. No, I will help him. Eren quickly rushed over to another box that was also bolted to the ground and opened it up. Quickly grabbing a flare gun out of the box, He loaded a red flare into the gun and proceeded to fire it up into the air. "Let's go," Ren thought as he jumped off the edge of the wall. XXXXX. It has been about 2 weeks since I entered into the area inside the massive wall, and I have done nothing but fight, and fight, and fight. The number of titans that were around me were staggering. I haven't been able to sleep for more than a couple minutes, and my chakra supplies were beginning to dwindle. I looked over my shoulder and saw 3 titans chasing after me, a mixture of smiles and frowns on their faces. I frowned at the sight before looking forward. Another wall lay before me, looming over the area like a guardian. I pushed some more chakra into my legs and jumped off the last tree that was nearest to the wall. The rain landing against my cloak and rolling down its side. There was a jut in the wall like the one before, meaning there was a city that lay within, but unlike the first, its gate had yet to be smashed in. My spirits began to rise once again when I saw a stream of red smoke fly up from the top of the wall, a flare. I glanced over my shoulder and saw that the titans were still chasing after me. Do I have enough chakra left? I will have to defend myself until they send support. Or if they are going to send support, I thought as I stopped in the center of the valley, preparing to fight. XXXXX. What is he doing? Ren exclaimed as he flew down the side of the wall. Did this guy really expect to fight these things without 3D maneuver gear? The titans grew closer to the cloaked man, but he stood his ground. Wait, please, don't do this. But Aren knew that his words weren't going to reach him. 2 chains fell from the man's cloak where his arms normally are. Long double-bladed hooks could be seen on the ends of each chain. The cloaked figure swiftly dashed towards the 3 titans, hooks dangling behind him. The first titan, and smallest one at that, brought down its hand onto the man, but the man nimbly jumped to the side. He quickly jumped onto the back of the titan's hand, but the said titan quickly brought his hand up and threw him up into the air. The cloaked shade swiftly began spinning in the air, twirling the chains around him. The hooks sliced into the back of the titan's neck, killing it instantly, but one of the other titans watched and reached out towards him. The cloaked man was just about to be grabbed when he suddenly shot to the side, and away from the grasp of the second largest titan. Aren watched as the hook's head embedded itself into the jaw of the largest titan on the other side of the center one in the same motion that had killed the first titan. He began swinging in front of the large mammoth and was quickly found flying over the back of the large one's neck. The hooks quickly sliced a chunk of flesh out of the back of its neck, killing this one as well, but suddenly a hand grabbed him from midair. No! Ren shouted as he landed onto the ground in front of the wall and began running towards the titan that grasped the cloaked man. He ran as fast as he could towards them, but it was going to be too late. The titan opened its mouth and placed his neck between its teeth, and then clasped down. Ren slowed his run to a mere walk before falling to his knees. No. But then the cloaked body exploded into smoke, disappearing from the titan's hand. Ren then saw the cloaked man in midair behind the titan, hooks coming down upon its neck. A loud slicing sound could be heard from behind the titan before it fell forwards and onto the ground in front of Aren, its head landing mere feet in front of the shocked soldier. The black-cloaked man landed onto the wet grass next to the dead titan, his hooks and chains following soon after. The rain continued to fall as he began walking towards Aren, hook and chain being dragged behind him in the wet grass. He stared at the cloaked figure that now stopped in front of him. Aren couldn't see his eyes, due to the positioning of the hood, but his mouth showed nothing but indifference. Like there was never any titans there in the first place. How strong is this guy? Aren thought as he continued to stare into the dark section underneath the hood. Suddenly, noise could be heard behind him, boots splashing against the wet grass. Halt! Stay where you are! A stern voice shouted. The sound of blades could be heard exiting their sheaths. Aren looked to his side to see garrison soldiers, with their flower insignia etched onto their brown coats. The man didn't move, simply staring back at the line of soldiers that had drawn their swords against him. State your name, the lead soldier shouted, clearly scared at what they had just witnessed. The man remained quiet, his mouth never wavering from its closed position. I repeat, state your name before we have to use lethal force, the soldier shouted. There are at least 10 garrison soldiers standing next to Aren, dual swords drawn and ready. Wait, Aren shouted before running in between them and the cloaked man. What are you doing? Stand down, Aren Jaeger, the lead soldier shouted. This man just took down 3 titans, and you draw your swords against him? What are you thinking? Aren shouted. He was roughly the same height, if not a bit taller, than he. How old was this mysterious man? The other men shuffled a bit, as if coming to their senses. Why would you ever draw your swords against another human? He's on our side, Aren shouted before pointing to the dead titans on the ground. Isn't this proof enough? The lead soldier looked to his comrades, who also looked puzzled, each of them having an internal fight of their own. Aren gritted his teeth. Lightning shot across the sky, followed by the loud boom of the thunder. Whether he's a friend or foe can be discussed at a later date. First, let's get him up the wall before more titans arrive. One of the more cool-headed soldiers said. The leader nodded. Good idea. You too. he said before pointing towards two of the larger men. Detain him. Oren, follow me. Command's going to want to hear about this. The two men walked past Oren and grabbed onto the cloaked arms of the shaded man. He never put up a fight as he walked with the 11 soldiers towards a wooden carriage that had been lowered for them, his hooks following along behind him. They all stepped onto the elevator before it began slowly rising up towards the top. As they rose, Oren looked over to the cloaked man that had killed 3 titans with ease. Most of his body was covered by the black cloak, even his arms were covered, but he was wearing black cargo pants with black boots. The man had tannish skin with whisker marks on his cheeks. He wore a gray backpack, most likely to carry only the essentials. The chains still lay to his side, but upon closer examination, Oren noticed that the tips of the hooks were like any normal hook, except sharpened to a fine point like the tip of a spear, but the inside and outside edges were all bladed. The man in question began moving his arms underneath the cloak. The two men holding him watched on to slowly move back underneath the veil of the black cloak. Once done, his legs began to waver, and he moved to sit down onto the floor of the carriage. "Hey, did I say you could sit?" the lead soldier asked. The man looked over at him before nodding and standing back up, but his feet were wavering. Was he tired? The wooden carriage stopped at the top of the wall. Once at the top, Oren noticed that a large group of garrison troops were on the wall. Some manning the cannons, others running up and down the wall, but most were staring at the black-cloaked man, who stepped off the carriage with us in tow. The only thing holding this man upright at this point was the 2 large soldiers. Sasha was standing off to the side, looking at me with concern blazing within her eyes. Connie was also there with a similar look on his face. "Was this the reason for the red flare?" an older man asked as he approached us. Kitz Woerman was his name, and acting commander of the Trust Garrison Brigade. All the soldiers, including Oren, stood straight and slammed their fists against chest. "Yes, sir," all 11 soldiers exclaimed in unison. The cloak never moved, but simply stared on underneath the veil of his hood. "And who, may I ask, is this man?" Kitz asked as he stepped up to the silent figure, who continued to do just that. "His name is still unknown at the moment, sir," the lead soldier shouted. Kitz glanced at the soldier who responded before returning his stare back to the man. "Now, let me ask you personally, boy, what's your name?" Kitz asked, an evil look on his face. "Lest I throw you over the side so our friends can have a snack." The man looked over his shoulder then back to Kitz. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Kitz blinked a couple of times before sticking his pinky into his ear. "Did you say something? I didn't hear you." The man lifted his hands out in front of him and pretended like he was writing something down on a piece of paper. Only his hands were seen, but even those were covered by black fingerless gloves. "What, do you need some paper or something? Can't talk or something?" Kitz shouted, clearly agitated by the lack of responses he was getting from the mysterious figure. The man nodded his head before pointing towards his throat. "Is there something wrong with his voice?" one of the soldiers detaining him asked aloud. "Must be, or maybe he can't understand our language," one of the other soldiers stated. "Quiet," Kitz exclaimed, making everyone stand at attention. "Bring him to the HQ, and call for Commander Pixis immediately. He's going to want to talk to him." "Yes, sir," the 10 garrison soldiers said as they began escorting the man away. Oren remained standing in place, saluting the officer. "And you, Oren, was it?" Kitz asked. "Yes, sir," Oren replied. "Report to the HQ as soon as your shift has ended." "Dismissed," Kitz said before striding away. Oren let out a breath that he didn't know he was holding. Sasha and Connie quickly ran up to Oren and began looking him up and down. "Are you okay?" Connie finally asked. "Yeah, I'm fine, thanks," Oren said as he sat down. "So, what happened?" "By the time we arrived back here everything was already over," Sasha said as she looked to her side. "Watching the 10 soldiers, plus Kitz and the cloaked man, walk away. When I saw the red flare rising up where you were stationed, I feared the worst." "Was it you who fired that flare?" Connie asked. "Yeah, it was me. The reason I did it was because," Oren said as he looked at the retreating form of the mysterious man. "He was out there all by himself with 3 titans chasing him." Wait, he was outside the wall? How is he even alive?" Connie asked. "I don't know, but one thing's for sure," Oren said as his eyes suddenly narrowed. "He's strong, and I mean really strong." "So the 3 dead titans down there," Sasha said as her eyes widened in shock. "I sure as hell didn't kill them," Oren replied before standing and walking away. Almost every soldier that was on the wall were all silent with wide eyes. What they had just witnessed was not only beautiful, but terrifying. A single man, a single human, just took down 3 titans by himself, without any 3D maneuver gear. Who was this man, and how did he disappear into smoke like that? I sat in a dimly lit room inside a large castle at the center of a large city. A large window, nearly the size of the entire wall, sat to my left. A single reinforced door was in front of me, locked so I couldn't escape. 2 wooden chairs, the one I sat in as well as another on the other side of a matching wooden table. where the only furniture in the room, save the hay that one could call a bed. Outside the window was a massive city, with people walking to and fro. People, actual people. A single tear appeared underneath my eye as I looked out across the city. I walked over to the window, and watched as the rain fell down upon the town. For so long I've wandered, no, for so long I've ran away from these things that have stopped at nothing to catch me. I remember watching as all the humans were hunted down and killed by the earliest titans. And when I realized that I could not defeat this new enemy, I ran. Retreated to the furthest reaches of the world in hopes that they would not find me, but in time they did. They always did. The door slowly creaked open to reveal a bald man that looked aged. His piercing eyes settling onto the being that looked not a year old than 20. So you must the outsider that everyone is talking about. Did you have a good sleep? The man asked as he walked into the room, and closing the door behind him, he took off his raincoat and placed it onto the back of the wooden chair before sitting down into said chair. I had fallen asleep for at least 5 hours, which was much needed, but only awoke when a soldier woke me up. Please, take a seat. I looked down at the chair before doing what he asked. He looked like a friendly enough person. My name is Commander Pixis, and I'm the leader of the Southern Garrison Forces, Pixis said as he pulled out a notepad and pen. He then placed them onto the table after saying, I heard you had a speech problem. I looked at the pen and paper with curious eyes. You know you can take that cloak off. It must be irritating to wear it all the time. I then looked down at my person then back up to him. He sighed, realizing that I wasn't going to say anything or take off my cloak. So tell me, where did you come from? I grabbed the notepad and pen, then began writing onto the parchment. Pixis watched as I scribbled down words onto the. After a few moments of me writing on the notepad, I handed it back to him for the older-looking man to read. You're from the outside and believed that all humans have been killed by the massive creatures. So you're from outside the walls. Tell me, where were you born? Pixis asked. He must believe that I must have been born somewhere within the larger wall. I retrieved the notepad and wrote down something else. Not within the walls. Pixis looked at the notepad, then back up at me, then back at the notepad. You can't be serious. I nodded my head. If you weren't born within Wall Maria, then does that mean there are other humans out there? After another set of scribbles, Pixis read my words carefully. No, they are all dead. This was the first human civilization I found. I see, so everyone else is dead. You must be pretty stealthy if you were able to last so long on your own out there. Pixis said as I removed my hood from my head. He frowned when he saw my face. To Pixis, he saw a young man that has lost everything, many times over. My eyes were dull and lifeless along with my facial features. I suppose living out in the wilderness with titans constantly on your heels would do that to you. I'm glad we were able to get you in here in time, but I've got reports saying that you managed to take down 3 titans. Is this true? Pixis asked, curious about this part greatly. Kayan revealed my arms, which were wrapped in thick chains with a hook tied to the end of each chain. But both of the hooks were grappled underneath one of the chains. This was done because I didn't want my hooks dangling from my forearms all the time. The chain continued to wrap up my arm until coming to a stop mid-bicep. Underneath was black leather, so that the chains wouldn't rub my arms raw. Interesting weapons you have there, but how did you manage to do it without 3D maneuver gear? Pixis asked. I sighed and looked up into the air. Revealing what I truly was would be hassle. He wouldn't believe me even if I told him the truth. I began scribbling down another sentence. I really needed to get my voice back. Training, Pixis stared into my blue eyes for what seemed like a century, contemplating if I was telling the truth or not. He leaned back into his chair and chuckled. You know, you should try playing chess sometime because I can't tell if you're telling the truth or not. You don't have to believe me, nor do I care if you do or not. I'm just happy to find other humans that are still alive. I wrote down. Pixis looked at the notepad before sighing. I suppose you're right. What I believe doesn't really matter when it comes to the hard facts. You killed 3 titans, and that's all there is to it. Pixis said as he snapped his fingers. In walked a soldier holding a tray of food. It looked to be a bowl of warm potato soup, loaf of bread, and a glass of water. The soldier set it down in front of me before turning and exiting the room, closing the door behind him. Please, eat. You must be starving. I nodded my head and began digging into the food, and it was glorious. When was the last time you ate? Pixis asked. 4 days. He shook his head with a frown adoring his features. I'm sorry son, must have been tough out there. You have no idea. I wrote down when I narrowed my eyes. Pixis nodded before snapping his fingers again. Another soldier entered the room with a chess set. He placed it down on the edge of the table, and picked up the now empty tray of food. How about we play a couple games while we let that food of yours rest? I love playing against new opponents, especially if they're good ones. Pixis said with a glint in his eye. I could tell this man was a master at the game, but I picked up the game way back in the day. I could use a good opponent to scrub off the rust with. And also, if you'd let me, I'd like to tell you about the history of our quaint little kingdom. XXXXX. Oren. A voice shouted to the soaked soldier walking through the streets of Trost. Oren looked over his shoulder to see a blonde-haired boy running towards him. He stopped in front of him, breathing heavily. "Oren, did you see the red flare? Where were you?" "What do you mean, Armin?" Oren asked. "Why weren't you in formation? Everyone was there except for you, Connie, and Sasha." "What happened?" Armin asked. "I was the one that shot the flare," Oren said with a deadpanned expression. Armin looked horrified. "So you were the one that—" Armin began to say. "Yes, I was," Oren responded before turning and beginning to walk away. "Hey, wait up," Armin exclaimed before running up and settling into a walk next to his friend. "So what was it about? You got everyone in the unit worried that the colossal titan had returned." Oren sighed and looked at his friend. "Do not speak a word of this to anyone. This information is classified until further notice. Do you understand?" Kit said in a threatening tone. The words rang his head, forcing him to take a vow of silence on the matter. "Sorry, but I was ordered not to speak of it to anyone." "Oh, I see," Armin said, a little downtrodden by the lack of information. "Where's Mikasa? I figured she'd be coming with you," Oren said as he looked around. "She was called to a meeting with a few of the high officials," Armin said, getting a nod from Oren. "Mikasa was the best of our class. It's no wonder that they called her after I shot the flare," Oren replied. "But she really wanted to come. Once we found out that the flare came from the section of the wall that you were stationed at, she tried to pull every trick in the book to come find you. It's just that," Armin tried to explain. "Orders are orders. Don't worry, I understand," Oren replied with a far-off look in his eyes. "Does he even care?" "No, he cares, there's just something else going on. Whatever happened up on the wall must have gotten him thinking," Armin thought. "Where are you headed off to now? Shouldn't you report back to?" "I've been ordered to report to Central HQ," Oren replied, cutting off Armin while pointing towards the castle at the center of the city. "Why would they need you to report there? Wouldn't you have already given your report to the field sergeant?" Armin asked. "I don't know," Oren replied. The blond boy puckered out his lips at the lack of attention he was getting from his childhood friend. "Well, it's my turn to clean the mess's dishes," Armin said with a loud groan. "Hey, have fun with that. I'll see you later on tonight," Oren replied as he waved over his shoulder. "Later," Armin replied before running off. Oren looked up into the sky and sighed. This rain was never going to let up, was it? XXXXX. Oren Yeager. A female soldier questioned with a clipboard. She was wearing glasses and had gray hair. "Yes, ma'am," Oren replied with a salute. "Follow me, please. Commander Pixis is waiting," the female soldier replied. "Commander Pixis? What's he doing here?" Oren thought. The young soldier followed the officer until they reached a door at the end of a long hallway. Two soldiers stood on either side of the door at full attention. "Through here," the officer said, opening the door for Oren. He nodded to her in respect and entered through the doorway. "Oh man, you truly are good, aren't you?" Pixis exclaimed in delight. Sitting in the room was Commander Pixis and the black-cloaked man, except only this time his hood was down, revealing his upper portion of his face. He had blue eyes and blonde hair that went down to his jawline. 3 whiskers adorned both of his cheeks, giving him a fox-like impression. But his eyes held no life, and his face mirrored his eyes. It's like he saw only death and the coldness of reality. He looked up at me and blinked those emotionless eyes. What was he thinking right now? "Oren Yeager of the 104th Trainee Division, reporting as requested," Oren recited, saluting the commander of the Southern Garrison Forces. "Ah, Oren Yeager. Good to meet you," the older man replied as he stood up from his chair. "You must be the young man that fired off that flare." "Yes sir, I was." And was he the reason you fired it?" Pixis asked while pointing towards the stoic man sitting at the table. "Yes sir." "I see. Well, do you mind explaining to me what exactly happened?" Pixis pushed as he sat down in the chair. "Of course. I was with Sasha Blouse cleaning the artillery on the southern end of the wall when it began to rain. Sasha went back to our field commander to see if we were to continue cleaning the cannons. That's when I saw this man," Oren then pointed to the cloaked man, "running away from 3 titans. I noticed that I was the only one around and decided that I would need help if we were going to save him. So, I fired a flare calling for help and moved to assist, but by the time I got there, he had already taken care of them." Pixis finished. Oren nodded his head, knowing full well that he must have gotten reports from some of other soldiers as well. "Well, your story matches those of the others as well," Pixis said as he leaned back into his chair. "Permission to speak?" Oren asked. "Go ahead. What are you doing here? Weren't you at a conference that was days away?" "I was, but I left the conference early because it had nothing to do with me. My subordinates that I left can handle anything that comes up," Pixis explained as he waved it off. He then turned to the silent man with a questionable look. "Areas what do with you?" The man tilted his head to side, confused at the comment. "What do you want to do? You've probably been on the run ever since you've been born, so it's understandable if you'd want to take it easy. Trust me, you've earned it," Pixis explained. Or you could join military and help fight against our mortal enemy. We could really use your talent with those hooks of yours." The man looked down at the table in quiet contemplation. Pixis and Eren stared at the man. If he were to join the military, then humanity would have another tool in their fight against the Titans. He began writing something onto the notepad, but stopped halfway when Pixis spoke up once more. "Just so you know, no matter what you choose, you may be drafted into the military because of your combat skills." Pixis explained, a small amount of grief in his eyes. "Humanity lost Wall Maria 5 years ago, as I've told you before during outgames of chess, and ever since we have been desperately seeking strong men to fill in the ranks." The man sighed and ripped the piece of paper from the notepad. He proceeded to crumple up the paper and throw it to the ground. He then wrote another sentence onto the paper. "Then I suppose it doesn't matter what I want, does it?" Pixis frowned at the sentence. This boy has been through so much, and Pixis knew that, even if he wanted to remove himself from the fighting, he would be dragged back into the fighting by the central government eventually. "I suppose it doesn't," Pixis replied. "Tell you what, take a couple of days and rest on it. I know you must be tired from your fight. We'll get you a better room than this one. A room with an actual bed." Pixis stood up and put on his coat. "I'll come back within the next 2 to 3 days. I'll try and talk to some people about the chance of your release into civilian life, but its chances are slim." He walked to the door and cracked it open. A few words were said to the gray-haired women outside the room before the commander turned to the 2 occupants of the room. "Eren, you are to escort him if he ever wishes to leave the confines of the HQ, but you 2 are not to leave Trust under any circumstances." "Yes, sir," Eren said with a salute. Pixis then turned to the silent man with a look of embarrassment. "During our time together I neglected to ask for your name," Pixis said as he rubbed the back of his head. "I guess I was so enthused in our game of chess that I completely forgot to ask." The young man tried to open his mouth but only a hoarse rasp came out. He tried again and the same thing happened until finally he found his vocal cords. "Nah," the man began to say before coughing. "Take your time, son. Don't push yourself too hard," Pixis said. The man nodded before clearing his throat. Naruto Uzumaki. Chapter 2. Outbreak XXXXX. I sat meditating on top of my bed. A small window was etched into the wall in front of me. From the 3rd floor of the castle I had a good view of the entire city of Trust. But the fantastic view was not what my mind had settled on. Inside my mind I stood in a completely dark room. 9 pedestals, about waist high, surrounded a single large one, which was about 12 feet tall. A bright white fire sat on top of the largest pedestal with the Roman numeral for 10 etched onto each of its sides. The remaining pedestals had fires of their own on top. For example, the pedestal with the Roman numeral for 1 had a golden brown fire on top. At the base of each pedestal an engraving ran from the bottom of the marble pedestals all the way to the large one that sat at the center of the room. Inside the engravings that ran along the floor, energy could be seen slowly creeping towards the pillars from the large pedestal at the center of the room. Although not all the fires were currently lit. I softly rubbed my hand across the top of the number 7 pedestal. Its smooth surface was barren of any fire like some of the others. "I'm sorry I couldn't do more, Chome. Your power was used in vain. I couldn't stop the Titans," I whispered as I looked out across the small room. The only fires that still remained lit were the numbers 1, 8, 9, and 10. When I was fighting the Titans at the very beginning, I drew upon Chome's powers in hopes that I could end the outbreak before it began, but I couldn't be everywhere at once. Every Titan that I killed, 10 more would appear and soon I found that there was no stopping these beasts. So I decided to run. When the last human that was with me died, I ran. Fu would be so angry if she saw what I did. "Huh?" I said with a sad smile on my face. Whenever I drew upon a Bijuu's power, memories would drip into my head of its past experiences. Fu had fought monstrous beasts somewhat like the Titans, but she was not in the same situation that I was in. Humanity was not in peril when she fought against the massive creatures around her home, and the creatures actually had a number to them, unlike the Titans. Only fragmented images would come back to me when I drew upon their powers. Most of the images would contain their powers and what they could do. Instinct would kick in as their whispers would tickle my ear, guiding me on how to correctly use their power. I knew that they were gone, even if their energy remained inside me. Calling upon their power did not bring back their bodies and voices. The only thing that I can remember them by was the broken images and memories that flashed in my mind as I used their power. Eventually the flames would return once the energy and the engravings on the ground reached the pedestals, but it takes a very long time for that to happen. I walked across the dark room, carefully stepping over the engravings in the ground, and stopped in front of the 9th pedestal. The crimson flame that sat atop the marble stand slowly burning away in front of me without a care in the world. Unlike the over 8 surrounding pedestals, this one was taller, up to my chest, and its flame was larger. All the flames seemed to grow as the number went up, but this one was much larger than the rest. I had a strange attraction to this pedestal out of all the others. My decaying mind could at least decipher that much. It's been a little while. I said as I sat down in front of the pedestal. I don't know why I'm talking to you so much. It's just that I have a close feeling to you above all the other biju. I looked around at the other pedestals before returning my gaze to the crimson flame. Each of them don't remember me talking to their auras here when I used their powers in the past, but I felt inclined to keep you, in particular, up on my life. I finally found some humans. They've managed to erect massive walls to keep out the titans, but they are under threat. They've lost a massive amount of ground and many have died due to a pair of titans that broke through the outermost wall. I explained, although it seems that they're scared of me. Some of the soldiers witnessed me killing some of the titans outside the wall without 3D maneuver gear on. I can understand their apprehensiveness towards me. I continued as I leaned back onto my hands. They've never seen someone use chakra before, and to see someone use it now after the practice has all but disappeared would scare anyone. But there's one person, Eren Yeager I think his name was, who has the same eyes as someone that was once close to me. And that's not all. There's something different about him, but I can't put my finger on it. Sighing, I looked at the red flame. It flickered slightly every now and again, silently listening to my recount of the last day or so. Why can't I remember you? We were close, I can at least feel that, but everything else? I balled my hand into a fist as I looked at the lingering fire. You know the worst part of all this? I can't even remember your name. For someone that I feel so close to, I can't even remember your name. I slammed my fist against the marble floor. The only thing I remember was when this curse was placed on me. Why did I go through with it? Why did we all think it was a good idea? Damn it, answer me? I stared at the crimson flame with such intensity, but nothing happened. No answer or signal that it was even listening. I breathed in heavily and took control of my emotions as I slowly got up. I've lived for such a long time. I just want it all to end, but I can't. Something is stopping me from just slicing my neck open and ending my life this very instant. I ran my hand down the side of the pedestal. I'm thankful for living such a long life. To be able to see the world as it changes, and the impact I had in steering it away from the darkness that threatened it. But you know what? It would have been a lot easier if you were here. If I had someone that was with me from the very beginning, I finally said. Knock knock knock. It seems there is someone here to see me. I don't know if my talks get through to you, but they certainly help me. Thank you, friend. I said with a bow before exiting the confines of my mind. I stood up and walked over to my door. Eren Yeager? I questioned. He looked disgruntled, if not bored, but I could see some trace amount of concern on his features. You've been in your room all morning and was wondering if everything was okay. Eren explained. The soldiers down in the cafeteria said you never got any breakfast, and the guards down the hall haven't heard anything either. Sorry, was just gathering my thoughts was all. I replied as I moved back into the room, Eren following me in. I understand. You've been through a lot. I can only imagine what you had to do in order to survive out there beyond the wall. Yeah, life was hard. I replied as I moved over to my backpack. I looked inside to check if everything was there. The contents of my backpack was several large storage scrolls, a wet stone, replacement chains links, flask, anything anyone would need for living on the run. Inside the 3 large storage scrolls was smaller scrolls, most of which contained jutsu and techniques. A few, however, I was not able to open. What's in those scrolls? Eren asked curiously. I pulled out one of the large blue scrolls and laid it on the bed. Very old information, I replied as I rolled it out slightly. What kind of information? Eren pressed. Information on how to kill people. Eren looked somewhat shocked at my response. The need to kill or harm another human was never needed in his eyes, at least not yet. But there are some scrolls that contain information that even I don't have access to, I said as I lifted up a black and red scroll. A metallic blue seal restricted access to the contents inside of the scroll. Where did that one come from? Eren thought as he looked down at the large blue scroll. Signs were scribbled across the contents of the scroll that he couldn't do to access them. And how can you read any of this? Eren asked, deciding not to ask about the appearance of the red and black scroll. This is a very old language that my people used to use, but the reason I can't access some of these scrolls is because their demands have yet to be met, I replied. And what's the demand for that one? Eren asked as he looked at the scroll in my hand. You've done so much for me. You saved me from so many terrible things, but most importantly you saved me from myself. I don't know how I can ever repay you for giving me the life I never thought I would have. Even giving you this can never amount to the happiness that you've given me. Now I don't know how this seal works, or what will happen to me after this ritual is done, but know this, you've always been my best friend. No matter the hardships that we've endured, that fact has stuck with me, even if I never admitted it to myself. Thanks for being there, Dobi, I'll never forget it, Teme. It was the letter that went along with the scroll itself. Opening the scroll proved to be impossible and the seal inside continued to be a mystery that constantly eluded my memory. Even so, I didn't create the seal that clamped this scroll, along with a few others, shut. But it seems that I had written something down on the back of the letter that pushed me away from ever wanting to open it in the first place. The price of power is steep, and this is no exception. This will only open when the last flicker of light threatens to fade from this world. I hope I never have to use this, but if what the old man says is true, then I may need it eventually. I looked up at Eren with a sad smile. When the last light threatens to leave this world, only then will the scroll be opened. Eren frowned at the message. Seems sinister. I nodded my head as I placed the red and black scroll onto my bed. So, what do you want to? My raspy voice was getting the best of me as I began to violently cough. Hey, are you okay? Eren said as he ran over and patted me on the back. I nodded my head in response. Thank you, but I'll be fine, I replied. I'll just have to be careful not to talk too much. That's fine, but are you hurt anywhere else? I could go grab some food for you if you'd like. Eren rambled out. I raised an eyebrow at Eren's eagerness. Was it because of how I killed those titans yesterday? I'm fine, just tired is all. Last night was the only full night of sleep that I've got in a long time. I replied. How about you show me around town? Sounds good to me. I'll go get you cleared to leave, Eren said as he opened the door. Meet me downstairs when you're ready to leave. After hearing the soft click of the door closing, I was once again alone to my thoughts. I put the red and black scroll back into its compartment inside the much larger storage scroll and then placed it back in its rightful place inside my backpack. Maybe one day, but not yet. I placed the leather guards around my forearms and began wrapping the chains around my now protected arms. Hey, when was the last time I did this? I hadn't taken them off in years. Guess it really has been that long. With the chains now completely wrapped around my arms, I picked up my hooks and twirled them around my hands. They've been my closest friends, next to the pillar of flames inside my mind, for centuries, or since the titans appeared. Time tends blur together when you've lived as long as I have. I wonder why they allowed me to hold onto my weapons. I suppose this was Pixis's doing. The hooks had handles on the end, allowing me to maneuver better if I'm ever closer to the massive beasts, or other humans. I then lashed the bottoms of my weapons to the ends of the chains and put my cloak on over my body. The ends are tattered and worn, but it only adds to my love for the piece of cloth. This cloak has been my home for centuries. I've worn it everywhere, glad it's waterproof. I moved to the heavy oak door and opened it. 2 soldiers sat at the end of the hallway. They were playing cards on top of a small wooden stool. Must have been bored out of their minds. As I approached the 2 soldiers, they both looked up at me, but I got mixed reactions. One soldier, the smaller and younger of the 2, had brown hair and eyes and looked terrified, while the other, who was taller with gray hair and black eyes, looked happy and full of pride at my appearance. Glad to see you up and about. You feelin' any better, son? The older man asked. Feeling much better, thank you, I replied with a bow. I wasn't very good at making facial expressions, but I could, at the very least, show respect in other ways. Well, that's good. Eren just went downstairs to get you cleared through the front gate. Take the stairs over there all the way down to the bottom floor. You should see Eren when you get there, the older man said with a smile. By the way, the name's Johnston Wilhelm. Good to meet you, Mr. Wilhelm, and thank you for the advice, I replied before coughing. I moved towards the stairway where Johnston had pointed without trying to talk to the other soldier. I didn't really feel like he was in the mood to talk to me. You did well, by the way, killing those titans. Keep up the good work, Johnston said. I smiled as best I could and entered the stairwell. It seems that not everyone was afraid of me. I made my way down the stairs and past several soldiers along the way. Each looked either scared or happy to see me. I suppose the prospect of a man single-handedly taking down 3 titans could be a little intimidating, but was it really warranted? I'm a human, just like them. Why would they be scared? Eren was standing near a set of giant metal doors that led outside. The gate was closed and 2 guards stood at attention on either side of the massive gate. Ready to go? Eren asked. I nodded my head in response. Alright, then follow me, and let me do all the talking. This prospect was something I was okay with. My throat was still hurting, and giving it some rest was needed, but I could tell that my voice was coming back. I could talk for much longer without a coughing fit interrupting my speech. So, I followed Eren to the doors where we were stopped by one of the guards. Does he have clearance to leave the HQ? Asked one of the guards. He does. Here are the clearance papers, Eren replied. The soldier sorted through the small booklet and looked towards me. Ah, yes, Naruto Uzumaki. Good job killing those titans, but these papers says to leave your hood on while outside of the HQ until your existence is fully disclosed. The soldier said with a straight face. He didn't look intimidated, nor impressed, by much at all. Which I feel is complete bullshit. The majority of the garrison troops here in Trost already know of your existence, but orders are orders. That paranoid leader of ours is truly something else. Must not be talking about Pixis. He handed the booklet back to Eren and sent a signal to the other soldiers standing with him. He nodded and pulled a lever next to the door, making the massive gate slowly creak up. The unseen chains groaned against the pressure that was being applied to them by the heavy weight. Light began to pour into the large room as the gate made its way up. I slipped my hood on once the light crept up to my face. Ready? Eren asked. I was a little apprehensive about exploring the unknown city. Even when I walked through it when I first arrived, I kept my head down as were my orders. Yes, I replied as we walked out of the HQ and into the city of trust. XXXXX Mikasa was normally a very calm and collected person. The prospect of crisis never really affected her much, but when a certain friend doesn't contact her for 2 days, she becomes very concerned. Her superiors have all but hindered her attempts to go and find Eren. Her commanders have kept her, and a couple of other soldiers, in meetings between upper-ranking officers. It was to get them prepared for the leadership position that was sure to come. While becoming an Officasa's primary concern was the safety of Eren and Armin. You're released until 1,400 hours. I expect you to be here at that time, understood? The commander of the 104th Trainee Division said. Yes, sir. Mikasa responded with a salute before leaving the office. Their current station was a 2-story building in the shape of a U that surrounded an open courtyard with each floor having a walkway, doors, and windows facing the courtyard. In truth, it looked like a motel that had been transformed into a military outpost. A large metal gate, guarded by 2 garrison soldiers, sat at the entrance of the courtyard. Mikasa walked down the outside stairs and towards her quarters on the first floor. Males and females were split up, with females being on the first floor and males on the second. You okay, Mikasa? A voice asked from behind her. She knew immediately who it was when the words left his mouth. You look kind of down. Oh, Armin. Just thinking is all. Mikasa replied, but her facial features betrayed the words that left her mouth. Ever since the flare was shot up on top of the wall, Eren has been missing, and she fears that something may have happened to him. Right, well, I talked to Eren yesterday, he told me. Wait, you talked to Eren? Where is he? Is he okay? Mikasa began to stutter out. Whoa there, yes, he's fine, and he's still in trust. Armin replied at Mikasa's sudden outburst of concern. He was ordered to report to the garrison HQ yesterday. I assume they're having him stay there for the time being. Why would he stay at Central? Mikasa voiced, clearly still concerned for her friend. I don't know, but he said it was classified. Sorry, Armin explained. What could be so important that it has to remain classified? Mikasa thought while tapping her foot. Well, I'm going to Central HQ to see if he's there. Wait, Armin said as he chased after her retreating form. What if he's not there? Then I'll find him. Armin wore a deadpanned expression. It's not that easy, Armin thought before sighing and chasing after his friend. I sat down to a plate of fruits, vegetables, and potato soup. We decided to have lunch at a tavern on the northern part of town, about 10 blocks away from where Eren is quartered. The room was musty with smoke hanging in the ceiling of the room. The old wooden furniture was wobbly, but the food was good and cheap. The window next to our table provided much needed light as we ate away. No meat? I asked. Ever since Wall Maria fell to the Titans, meat has been somewhat scarce. The people here in Trost can hardly afford the delicacy of fresh meat. Eren replied with a slight frown. It's sometimes rationed out, but only when a nobleman feels obligated to do so. I see, I replied as I began eating my food. We've been walking for a few hours, exploring the city and all that it had to offer. The people seemed happy, simply glad that they lived through the evacuation 5 years prior. Tell me, I saw you die, eaten by the Titans outside the walls. How are you still alive? I looked down at my food, confused of how I should answer his question. Should I tell him of my secret? Of how old I truly am? To him I look like an early 20s man who has seen too much, but that couldn't be further from the truth. It's an ability that I've used to keep myself alive for a very long time. An ability? What ability allows you to do that? Eren asked. I'm sorry, Eren, but I don't trust you yet. I've only met you yesterday. I replied with an even tone. I don't know who he is, or his background. So, why would I give him any secrets about myself? Oh, I suppose that's true. Eren looked a little downtrodden at this aspect. I've only given out my secrets to those I completely trust, unless a situation forces me otherwise. I said in complete seriousness, but then tried to sound a little friendlier. But, so far, you're the only one willing to carry on a conversation with me, other than Pixis. So it's a step in the right direction. I stopped and took a sip of water. Eren's expression had lightened somewhat by my words. At least I'm gaining some amount of trust, Eren thought as he took another bite of the vegetables. We finished our food with Eren talking about the history of trust. It was interesting, but Pixis had given me a much broader history lesson on how humanity had hid behind these walls for centuries. During that time I had been on the run from the Titans, never knowing that this pocket of civilization had continued to survive. Eren paid for the food and we exited the tavern. How about I show you where I'm stationed? You'll maybe even meet some of my comrades I had during basic. I shrugged my shoulders. Seemed like a good idea to me. After about a 15-minute walk we soon arrived at a gate that guarded a motel-looking building. 2 guards stood behind the gate, but they were leaning against the metal bars talking. Julius, Edward, mind opening up the gate? I've got a VIP that I'd like to show around. The 2 soldiers looked at us as we approached, and almost immediately the look of terror was etched across their faces. Now this was not uncommon, but the majority of the garrison troops that believed in the rumor saw me thought I was something short of a god. Whether or not I was an evil or good one depended on the person. Does he have clearance to enter? Edward asked. He had short brown hair with black eyes, and stood about the same height as me. He does, you should know that, Oren said in a questioning tone. Right, sorry. Julius, can you help me with the gate? Edward asked. Julius nodded his head before moving to help with the gate. Julius was taller, and much more muscular, with black hair and hazel eyes. Once the gate was opened for us, we entered through, but I noticed that the two soldiers kept their distance. It's like they think I'm going to bite their heads off, I thought. Oren stopped at the center of the courtyard and looked over his shoulder. Wonder what their problem is. I shook my head and looked around at the building that surrounded us. Is this? It is. This is where we are currently stationed, Oren said, but looked kind of annoyed. I wonder where everyone's at. He continued to look around before shrugging his shoulders. Oh well, how about I show you my quarters then? I need to get a few things from there if I'm going to be staying at the garrison's HQ for the next couple of days. When Oren was looking around, there was indeed several soldiers walking around the motel, but I just assumed that none of them were his friends. We made our way up to the second floor and into one of the rooms. There was 2 beds with a connecting bedside table. A single lamp and a couple of pictures sat on top. A large window pointed out towards the courtyard, where a couple of soldiers began practicing hand-to-hand combat. Dust danced in the light that entered through the window, some landing on the table that sat in the corner of the room. A single chair was tucked underneath the wooden table, and a door, which led to the bathroom I assume, sat at the very back of the room. Each of the beds were neatly made with a wooden box that sat at the end of each. Pretty comfortable compared to some of the other units, but since our division held the highest scores, this was our reward until we are placed into our separate sections, Oren said. The military was made up of 3 sections: the Survey Corps, Garrison, and Military Police. Each with their separate functions that are needed to protect and serve the whole of humanity. This was the system that I'm going to be dragged into. I don't really care about the politics that this kingdom has in place, but I do care about the people that live here. I care about the well-being of each person that lives inside these walls, and if that means killing more titans, then I would do it in a heartbeat. I looked over at Oren as he began rummaging through his crate of supplies. Something about him just doesn't sit right. He's nice, and has a burning ambition, belts about him that reminds me of a previous encounter. Who else is in this picture? I asked as I picked up a picture that was on the bedside table. Oren was young, and there was 2 other people in the photo as well. A blonde-haired boy, and a black-haired girl with a red muffler. Oh them? The blonde one is Armin and the girl is Mikasa. We go way back before, Oren said as he looked down at the pack that he was filling up with gear. I looked up from the photo to Oren's hair had covered his eyes and his mouth did little to reveal his emotions, before my mother was killed by them. I watched as his grip on the backpack tightened. I watched as she was eaten by one of those monsters. I hate them. I hate them with every fiber of my body. I will kill every last titan until not a single one of them is left standing. A frown graced my features as the boy talked about how much he hated the titans. Don't get me wrong, I hate them too, but if there's one thing that I've learned over my extended life, it was to keep calm at all times. Is that so? I replied as I looked down at the picture. The 3 looked so happy together, it made me cringe at the sight of what he had become. I hope this revenge doesn't lead to an early death. I moved over to Oren and placed a hand on his shoulder. The boy looked at me with those angry green eyes still raging. Let's get going. It's getting stuffy in here. Oren slowly calmed himself and finished packing his things. We moved outside and down the stairs, where I was met by a fascinating sight. A blonde-haired girl was fighting against 5 male soldiers. Who's she? I asked as we watched the girl decimate the 5 trainees. That's Annie Lenhart. She's one of the best hand-to-hand combat fighters in the division and ranked 4th when we graduated, Oren said. We continued watching Annie fight and I was mildly impressed. She knew how to fight, and there were very little faults in her fighting style, but there was still faults. The 5 boys now laid on the ground, either knocked out or barely conscious. Weak, Annie said as she looked up at us, her gaze almost immediately landing on me. Who are you? We walked over to her before responding. This is Naruto, the VIP I've been tasked to escort until Commander Pixis returns to Trost. Naruto, Annie said as she sized me up. Did you watch me fight? I nodded my head. What do you think? Why does she care what Naruto thinks? Annie has never expressed interest in anything, or cared what others thought of her. Oren thought as he looked between the 2, curious more than anything. You're good, but there are flaws. I replied with an even tone. She looked somewhat surprised at my response before returning to her passive expression. Is that so? Then would you care to show me these flaws? Annie asked. She didn't much like her fighting style, which was her pride and joy, being called faulty. I silently sighed and looked over at Oren, who gave me a shrug that stated, "This is your fault, bud. I suppose there's no helping it," I thought before following her to the center of the courtyard. I finally get to see his fighting style up close, Ren thought as he leaned against one of the poles that held up the walkway above. Annie got into her fighting stance, while I simply watched. Not going to ready yourself? Fine. The blonde-haired girl dashed towards me at a quick pace before sending her right fist towards my head. I tilted my head, dodging the punch, and sent a punch of my own towards her stomach. Her other hand quickly grabbed onto my wrist and began twisting it. I see, so she's trying to force me to turn my body and suppress me that way. Interesting. I thought as shot my free elbow into her ribcage. Annie's eyes held surprise as she let go of my wrist and quickly jumped back, composing herself quickly. Your movements are quick. I'll give you that much, Annie said as she rubbed her side. And those hook and chains that are wrapped around his arms. What are those for? I didn't even put any chakra into that attack, I thought. But you won't catch me off guard again, Annie exclaimed as she dashed towards me. I grinned slightly as I parried another of her punches. Her expression had shifted from expressionless and bored, to slightly excited. I parried another of her punches and swiftly kicked her legs out from underneath her, but she used the momentum from this attack to place a hand onto the ground and sending a kick of her own towards my chest. I blocked the attack, but was sent back a couple of steps. She has some power behind her attacks. She's certainly a lot stronger than she looks, I thought as she got back onto her feet and dashed towards me once more. But it looks like we've attracted a crowd. Sure enough, there was a small crowd of soldiers around us, watching us as we sparred. Out of the corner of my eye I caught a glimpse of two people that looked familiar, but disregarded it for now. The blue-eyed girl in front of me had my sole attention for now. It was also at this moment, I thought as Annie parried one of my kicks, that I realized that this must be one of the first times she has had an opponent that was of, at least, equal skill level. Her expression, while still somewhat passive, held large amounts of excitement and happiness. After a counter parry forced her to jump back, a small smile appeared on her face. Where did you learn to fight, Naruto? Oh, here and there, I replied. I grinned when her smile got slightly larger for my response. Well, let's end this. I've got to report to my station in 30 minutes, Annie said. I nodded my head in understanding. She charged towards me, but right before she was in range of an attack, she dashed to the side. My eyes followed her as when her legs went towards my midsection. I quickly grabbed onto her leg and pulled her towards me. Her eyes widened slightly at my action, but she used my grasp on her leg to twist her body so her other leg was now flying towards my head. I ducked my head underneath the kick, and once the kick had flown over my head, I placed my free hand on her back and proceeded to push her towards the ground. Annie's chest slammed against the ground, but I wasn't finished. To secure my victory, I grabbed a hold of her arm and twisted it behind her back. I wasn't putting any pressure on her arm, but I put it in a position that would allow me to restrain her if need be. My knee was pressed against her back, but, again, I wasn't putting any weight behind it. The girl beneath me sighed, before looking up at me. She wasn't smiling anymore, but her expression was much lighter than before. Okay, you win. I stood up and offered her a hand, which she took. That was a good spar. I don't think there has ever been anyone that could match me in hand-to-hand combat. We should definitely do it again, but next time, Annie said before leaning in closer and bringing her voice down to a whisper. Don't hold back. A chorus of claps erupted around us. Annie looked surprised as she looked around us. I was so into our spar that I didn't even realize that we attracted a crowd. Annie thought. My hood still blocked the top portion of my face, but I wore a knowing grin. I could tell that she doesn't like to be the center of attention, but the growing attraction went unknowing to her. Whatever, I need to get going. Next time take that hood off. I'd at least like to see your face when we fight, Annie said, returning to her bored attitude before leaving through the dispersing crowd. I watched as she left the base before looking over at Eren. Two people, the two from the photo, stood by his side. All three of them held expressions of awe. Only the girl managed to contain the expression better than Eren and the other. Did you just? The blonde boy began to ask once I stopped in front of them. Eren shook his head with a wide grin plastered on his face. He shouldn't have expected anything different than this outcome. Nobody has ever beat Annie in a hand-to-hand combat spar before. Well done, Eren said, Pater. Is that so? I replied. She certainly knew how to fight, but there's something off about her. My gaze then turned to Eren. What is it? Eren asked. It's nothing, I replied, shaking the thought from my head. The girl's eyes narrowed somewhat at this action. Well, anyway, these are my friends. Naruto, meet Armin and Mikasa, Eren said, pointing to each person as he said their names. I bowed my head in respect. Nice to meet you. Eren told us what's going on. So you're the VIP that he's been tasked to escort, Armin said as he reached his hand out to me. I accepted his hand. Nice to meet you, Naruto. Sorry about Kits. He can be that way sometimes. Don't worry about it. I began to say, but my throat got the better of me as I began to lean forward and cough heavily. Eren was immediately at my side with a hand on my back. Take it easy. What did I tell you when we left HQ this morning? Eren asked. I sighed and nodded my head. Right. Are you okay? Armin asked. concern evident in his eyes. This boy truly had a good heart. He's fine, it's just that there is something wrong with his throat right now, Eren said.
Well, he's not lying, I thought, as the blonde boy nodded, satisfied with the answer, but Mikasa has stayed quiet this entire time. I could feel that she distrusts me, and if I was in her shoes I wouldn't trust me either, but for the time being I needed to stay anonymous. If not for my sake, then for Eren's.
Well, I hope you feel better, Armin said with a smile while eyeing Mikasa. But Mikasa is going to be late for her meeting if we stay any longer. Eren raised an eyebrow in suspicion before turning to me. How about we keep exploring the city then? There's still plenty to see. Sure, I replied before looking over at the girl. She was extremely protective of Eren, that much could be discerned, but was there something else as well? I couldn't tell if it was hatred towards me, or a wish to keep Eren away from me, that was causing her to glare at me like the way she was. XXXXX. Once they were gone, Armin turned to Mikasa, confusion evident on his face. What was that about? What do you mean? Mikasa replied. You know exactly what I mean, why were you giving Naruto such an angry look? Mikasa sighed before looking up into the air. It's just that everything doesn't add up. You caught that too? Armin asked. Mikasa looked surprised when Armin said this. What? I'm not completely helpless, you know. Then, yeah, I probably asked myself the same thing. Why was Eren, still an official trainee, asked to escort a VIP? The protection of a VIP can be one of the most simple, but hardest, missions for any soldier. So why was Eren asked and not someone more qualified? Armin lowered his head in thought. This was something that he had caught on to as well, but decided to keep quiet. Could it have to do with the flare that he shot before? Why would that have anything to do with the VIP? Mikasa asked. It's only a thought, but… Armin began. Mikasa, the two looked up to see their commanding officer standing on the balcony. Get up here ASAP, you're already late.
Yes, sir. Mikasa responded with a salute. Once the officer went back into his office, the black-haired girl looked over at Armin. We'll talk later.
XXXXX, sorry about that. Mikasa isn't generally so distant. Eren apologized as we walked down the main road leading to the eastern part of town. It's fine, but are you okay with keeping your friends in the dark like this? I don't really like the idea, but orders are orders. I'm a soldier now and that means following my superiors without question. I frowned when I heard Eren's thoughts on being a soldier. Following someone blindly only means that he, or she, will eventually be used. Like a tool in a shed. The military seems to control a lot here. Yeah, it used to not be like this. Before the fall of Wall Maria, the military was not really in the limelight, but afterwards. I nodded my head in understanding. Fear tends to push people towards doing things that are not always correct, but needed. I understand. Still, who's the ruler? I asked. King Fritz. He is the current reigning king from the royal family. Eren replied. Why do you ask? No reason, just curious. I replied as we stopped at a fruit cart that was selling all kinds of delicious treats. Candy and fruit was their largest market, but on the side was a blacksmith, which only sold household items. Are the citizens allowed to carry weapons? I don't think so. Since our enemy are the Titans, the royal family doesn't see the reason for normal citizenry to carry weapons, Eren explained. What's the matter? Mind if I get some fruit? Eren nodded his head and showed the owner of the cart a piece of paper. The owner nodded and handed Eren a small bag of fruit. There were apples, grapes, oranges, and blueberries held within the burlap bag. Will this work? Eren asked as he handed me the bag. I nodded my head and continued on behind the young soldier. We walked around the city for about 5 more hours until finally arriving at the gates of the HQ. The orange sun was shining over the walls, tinting everything with its magnificent glow. Thanks for showing me the city. No problem. It must be nice to actually walk around like this, Eren said. Yeah, I suppose you're right. It's been a long time, that's true. Want to explore some more tomorrow? I don't know when Pixis will come back, but my current mission is to stay by your side unless instructed otherwise. One of my eyebrows went up in question. He almost seemed desperate. Sure, but why do you want to explore so much? Because if I'm not with you then I can be assigned jobs from the 104th Trainee Division. Eren replied. I grinned at his bluntness. So he was just trying to get out of work. How shrewd. Well, we wouldn't want that now, would we? I asked as we entered the HQ. What time do you want to start? We now stood in the main lobby just in front of the large gates leading outside. Come by after breakfast. I should be ready then, I replied. We parted ways and I was finally alone to my thoughts once more. Now inside the comforts of my quarters, I sighed deeply and looked over at my backpack. It sat on top of my bed, unmoved from its original spot. I walked over to the backpack and took out the large blue scroll. I opened the scroll and went through some of its contents. I ran my hand across several of the seals, only to grow more and more frustrated. I put each of these scrolls here. I created each of these seals that binds them to the parchment. So why can't I remember what's in them? I thought in anger. While it's true that I could access the majority of the seals, some have been closed off from me. The seals that bound the scrolls shut were not of my creation, but I allowed them to be placed there. So why? What was the purpose? I closed the scroll and placed it back into the backpack. I landed onto the bed and closed my eyes. It was still fairly early, around 9 at night, but I wanted to think. To remember the only shred of memory that remains somewhat clear inside my fragmented memory of that time. XXXXX flashback. Are you sure about this? I asked a floating man inside a white room. His face was unrecognizable, but I could feel the power radiating off of him. I'm sorry, but you're the only one, the floating man replied. Am I really? I replied in question, doubt evident in my voice. The old man sighed deeply. You're the only one I can trust to do this, the man said, and not only me. You're the only one that has gained the respect of the Biju. They'd only do this if it was you. And what of them? What will happen to the Biju once this jutsu is complete? I'm sorry, but they have asked me not to tell you. So they'll disappear because of some lousy pro. Silence. The man boomed. All of them have agreed to do this. They trust you. Don't you see how hard that was for them to do? This darkness will come to pass, and you're a bit. I looked to the ground and thought, and if this jutsu actually works, and I become this eternal, as you have called, how long will it take? How will I know when this darkness arrives? I do not know how long, but you will know Naruto. Everything will become clear when the darkness encroaches on the world and the last bastion of light is threatened. XXXXX. I guess the near genocide of the human population wasn't enough. I said to the empty room as my thoughts lingered back to red and black scroll. If my assumptions are correct, and that elderly man placed those seals onto the scrolls, then this kingdom is that last bastion of light. Was I supposed to find these walls where humans still held out against the ever-growing swarm of titans? I didn't really care about the prophecy anymore. It's been such a long time since I talked to him, and the old sage has never once spoken to me since then. Only pain could be felt when I tried to think of the times after that meeting, so I stopped thinking about it altogether. The bag of fruit sat neatly in the corner of the room. A snap wouldn't hurt.
A bright red apple emerged from the bag and I took a healthy bite from the sweet fruit. It was getting late and the sun had dropped behind the crest of the wall. I removed the chains from around my arms and placed them on top of my backpack. My arms felt naked without the heaviness that came with the metal chains and hooks.
But something still didn't feel right about this place. XXXXX the next morning. Eren. You awake? A voice said from the end of his bed. Said soldier groaned and sat up on his bed. Naruto said he wouldn't be ready to leave until after breakfast. Yes, sir. What time is it? Eren asked as he pulled himself from the bed. At the end of his bed was a lieutenant garrison soldier. Which division? Eren didn't know, but in any case the man was of higher rank than Eren. 5 in the morning, but Commander Gult has called for you. You're to report in his office by 0530, the garrison soldier said. Do you know if I need to bring anything? Eren asked as he put on his uniform and made his bed. He didn't say anything, just that he requested your presence, the soldier explained. Thank you. I'll go report to him as soon as possible. Don't be late, you know how he feels about tardiness. Tell me about it. Eren replied. The young soldier followed the garrison soldier to the front gate, where he got permission to leave. Eren exited the building into the dark morning streets of Trost. There wasn't very many people walking the streets, and everything was coated with a thin layer of dew. Lampposts were the only source of light on the street, except for the occasional restaurant serving breakfast to the early birds. I wonder what Gult wants, Eren thought as he approached the gate of the 104th Trainee Division. It must be pretty important if he called me this early.
The guards standing behind the gate looked casually at Eren as he approached. They were different than the ones from yesterday.
Eren Jaeger? One of the guards asked. Eren nodded his head in confirmation. The guard nodded and moved to open the gate, the other soldier helping him with the process. Once the gate was open, Eren stepped in and the gate was closed behind him. We were expecting you. Gult is waiting up in his office. Any idea what he wants? Eren asked. No idea. The soldier responded. The second soldier shrugged his shoulders, signifying he was clueless as well. Eren sighed and walked up the stairs towards his commander's office. He stopped once he was in front of the door and knocked 3 times. After a couple moments of silence, a gruff, "You may enter," came through the door. Eren opened the door and saw Commander Gult sitting behind his desk with a lamp on top of it. He had a bald head and broad shoulders. The commanding officer looked like a man who has weathered a rather painful storm and lived to tell the tale. An insignia for trainee was etched into his uniform coat, but anyone could tell that he was far from a simple trainee.
Eren closed the door behind him and stood silently before his commanding officer. The older man worked on his paperwork until finally putting down his pen.
You are Eren Jaeger, correct? Gult asked. Yes, sir. Eren replied with a salute. Eren Jaeger, reporting as requested. Tell me, Private Jaeger, what was an unauthorized man doing on my compound yesterday? Unauthorized man? Do not play dumb with me, Private. You know exactly who I'm talking about, Gult shouted as he slammed his hand onto his desk. making the lamp shake from the amount of force put into it. He was not unauthorized, sir. That man has permission to enter any military facility that I do, sir, Oren replied with equal fierceness. Is that so? Now answer the question, son. Who is that man? Did you not get the transfer orders? It should state. Don't test me, boy. His name is Naruto, sir. It was at this moment that Oren realized there must have been information deliberately left out of the transfer orders. Pixis must have only told Gult that Oren was escorting a VIP for a few days and that was it. Naruto? What a strange name. Gult said as he moved over to the window. Is he the reason why you were transferred to HQ? Yes, sir. He certainly doesn't seem like someone that needs protection. Gult stated. He must have seen Naruto spar with Annie. Tell me, why did someone with that amount of fighting prowess need the protection of a trainee? Naruto doesn't need me for protection, sir. Gult looked at Oren in confusion. He has never been to Trost before and requires a guide to show him around the city until Pixis returns. It wasn't a lie, and it wasn't the complete truth. I figured as much, but you know what completely confuses me? Gult asked. No, sir. Why you, of all people, were chosen to escort a man with a level 5 protection order on his head? A bead of sweat fell down Oren's face as he looked at everything that wasn't Gult. I mean, if it had to be a trainee, then why not Mikasa? She's one of the strongest soldiers I've seen in a long time. Why not Choser? Gult asked to nobody in particular. Oren frowned at the statement, but elected not to say anything. He didn't like being compared to his sister, but talking back to this man would only lead to further trouble. But no, Pixis chooses you. Why is that, I wonder? Gult was now standing over Oren like a bell tower looming over its church. After a couple moments of Gult standing in front of a discomforted Oren, the older man shook his head and walked back behind his desk. You're to report here at 1000 hours. There is a job that needs to be completed up on the wall. But what about? I don't rightly give a damn about your precious VIP. He can wait until after the job assigned to you is complete. Do you understand, soldier? Gult said with an aggravated expression. Yes, sir, Oren replied with a salute. Dismissed, Gult said. Oren quickly left the office and soon found himself in the courtyard. Shit, I promised I'd escort Naruto today after breakfast. I guess he'll have to wait. XXXXX. I sat in the small cafeteria with a thick bowl of oatmeal in front of me. A banana sat next to it along with a mug of milk. No meat again. A few soldiers at a table next to mine burst out into laughter. They were talking about how they had a crazy night out on the town. The soldiers would occasionally send me glances of worry, but I suppose it's better than outright terror. My hood was down so maybe I looked a little less intimidating. Hey there, hero. How you doing this fine morning? A man said as he placed his tray onto the table in front of me. I looked up and saw Johnston sitting down in front of me with a giant smile. Fine, just tired is all. I replied, trying to get used to a normal sleeping schedule. Must feel nice sleeping for more than a couple of hours. Can only imagine what it was like out there. It wasn't fun, I said softly with a frown. Johnston laughed at my comment. I'm sure it wasn't. Soldier looked at me seriously. What will you do now though? I kind of recoiled from the question, even though I didn't show it on the outside. The only shred of emotion people can get from me was the occasional slight grin, or frown. What do you mean? Are you going to join the military, or will you fall into civilian life? From the looks of things, I'm going to be forced into the military whether I like it or not, I replied, taking another bite of my oatmeal. At least my voice was coming back. It still sounded a bit raspy, but it was coming along. I figured they would draft you into the military, but which branch is the question? The military seems fragmented. I take it you talked to Pixis about the state of the military? How do you know? Was standing guard outside your room when Pixis entered and left. He was in there for a while, so I figured Pixis was bring you up to speed. I'm just glad you speak our language. Me too. But you're right. The military is pretty fragmented between the 3 major military groups. Johnston explained, taking a bite from his food, which was the same as mine. Why did you join the garrison? Same reason as everyone else. The top 10 members of every class gets the chance to join the military police while everyone else either joins the Survey Corps or the garrison. Johnston explained. And since I'm not suicidal, I decided to join the garrison. The Survey Corps are the ones that roam outside the walls, right? Yup, only the bravest of the brave join them. But the majority of those guys never come back from an expedition outside the walls. I can see why. Those things are relentless and won't stop chasing you until you're dead. Something I have first-hand experience with. You may be drafted into the Survey Corps for just that reason, but who knows, maybe Pixis can get you released into civilian life. Johnston said, but then leaned forward towards me. But is that really what you want? Think on for a while. You'll see what I'm talking about eventually. Johnston said before standing with his empty tray. He took mine as well and walked off towards the sinks to clean them off. Is that really what I want? XXXXX. Why am I even here? Oren asked himself as he scrubbed the inside of a cannon. He looked around and found that a large portion of his class was positioned to this segment of the wall. Still, it's nice to know that the majority of them joined the Survey Corps because of my speech a couple of days ago.
What did you say? Connie asked in irritation. Nothing, just surprised to hear that some of you decided to join the Survey Corps because of me. Eren said as he rubbed the back of his head.
Whatever. Sasha, put that meat away. I thought we de-iced to save it for after our shift, Connie exclaimed as he ran over to the purple-haired girl. Eren chuckled lightly as he looked out across the landscape. His eyes eventually traveled to where Naruto had killed the 3 titans. How did he disappear in a cloud of smoke like that? Eren thought as images of the fight appeared in his mind. I never took my eyes off him, so how did he? XXXXX I sat on my bed meditating. Eren had yet to come by, which meant that I was stuck here in HQ. Johnston had been deployed somewhere else, like the majority of the soldiers, and the only ones that remained were officers that were filling out paperwork. There are some guards, but the majority of them seemed nervous whenever I asked them a question. So here I sat away from the eyes of others. It was here where I could find my peace. A place where nobody will disturb me. A place where titans couldn't chase me. Boom, my eyes shot open and I immediately ran to the window. You got to be kidding me. The colossal titan. The thing that broke open wall Maria now stood above the gate leading into Trost. And judging from the explosion, just destroyed its gate as well. I sighed and looked over at my backpack. My hooks leaned against the gray backpack, my chains rolled up next to it as well. I made my way over to weapons and picked them up. Slowly I began wrapping the chains around my padded arms until they were nice and tight. The hooks were then secured along with my backpack. I opened the door that led to the hallway outside. Soldiers ran about in panic. Shouts of fear and anger echoed off the walls of the old castle as they prepared for what was to come. Swiftly I made my way past the rushing soldiers. None of them seemed to notice I was even there and soon I found myself by the doors leading outside. Garrison soldiers wearing 3D maneuver gear dashed past me and onto the roofs of the buildings leading towards the gate. Boom, I saw the top of the wall get destroyed by the colossal titan. As quickly as it destroyed the top of the wall, the titan exploded into steam, disappearing from sight. Is that what happened last time? I didn't put much thought into it as I pushed chakra into my legs. And with that I disappeared from my position amongst the chaos of the HQ. I jumped from building to building before finally landing on the top of a rather large bell tower that had a vantage point that could see the gate leading into the city. The distance was great, but I could see that it was blown wide open and titans were streaming in like a broken dam. The last bastion of humanity was under threat once again just 2 days after I got here. How troublesome. Panic-stricken shouts and screams filled the air. The streets below were flooded with civilians rushing to get out of the city. I could merge into the crowd. Blend in and escape into the hinterland behind the wall, I thought, but frowned when I remembered the aftershock that came when the colossal titan arrived 5 years ago. Our shells just bounced off of it like rain to a wool coat, Pixis said as he looked out the window. The heavy rain pattered against glass, making the calming noise that I loved so much. It charged right through the open gate and burst open the second gate leading into the hinterland. Nothing can stop something that strong. I looked towards the gate and saw more titans had begun streaming through. Soldiers jumped from rooftop to rooftop towards the destroyed gate while the thunder of artillery boomed from atop the wall. Whatever was left of the cannons on top of the wall must be firing off frantically, but from this end they seemed to have little effect on the flow of titans entering the city. The soldiers passed underneath me without even looking at me, but I could see the fear etched onto their faces. Now what? I thought as more soldiers jumped past me towards the titans that had entered the city. It seems that they are sending them in waves. I need to help, but simply killing them here in the city will have little impact. I need to get outside the city walls if I'm going to have an impact on this battle. I jumped down to the top of the church, landing right next to a frightened soldier. She was shorter, maybe 5 foot 6 inches, and had shoulder-length brown hair. The emblem for trainee could be seen on her brown uniform, but she looked anything but a soldier. She was curled up in a ball and hunkered against the side of the church tower. Tears stained her cheeks and her swords lay on the ground on either side of her. The girl jumped when I landed next to her. Her emerald eyes looked up to me from over her gray muffler in complete terror. I looked down at her from underneath the veil of my cloak and felt only pity. Was this all humanity could muster in its time of need? I slowly knelt down next to the girl until I was about eye level. She couldn't be more than 16 or 17. Why you're not gonna make me go F-fight, are you? The girl asked. What's your name? I asked, sitting down in front of her. Karen. Karen Pius. Karen replied. Karen, what a pretty name. I said with smile, at least, the best smile I could give. Tell me Karen, why are you crying? She looked over my shoulder towards where the fighting was going on only for her eyes to widen in fear. I don't want you join the military if you didn't want to fight. I was forced to join by my parents. I don't belong here, I just want to go home and be with my friends. I frowned at Karen's position. She didn't possess the mentality to be a soldier, and she didn't want to possess it either. If she were to go into battle in this condition then she would just get killed instantly. I slowly stood up and held out my hand to the terrified girl. I'm not going to fight, Karen began to shout. Shish. I replied calmly, I won't make you fight. Karen looked skeptical. How do I know you aren't lying? Because I'm not a soldier. I replied. Karen looked at my garments and found that I wasn't wearing a military uniform. The girl took my hand and I helped her stand up. Now, let's get you out of here. Thank you for understanding. Karen said. Don't worry, I understand your fear. I said as I walked to the edge of the roof. Follow me. But you don't have a. But before she could utter another word I had already jumped from the roof. Shocked, Karen ran to the edge of the roof to find me standing on one of the smaller surrounding buildings. 3D maneuver gear. I waved up for her to follow, which she quickly did, landing to my side. How did you? I waved her question off. An old family tradition, and with that I jumped to the next building with Karen following quickly in tow. Tell me, which division are you in? 104th Trainee Division. I'm supposed to join the garrison, but from the looks of things, Karen said as she looked down beneath her. You'll be fine, Karen. Trust me. I replied as I jumped up to one of the taller buildings. Karen landed next to me and looked around the area as well. You think so? Karen asked. Yes, I replied as I continued to survey the area. Looks like the Titans are getting closer. Where are we going? Why aren't we heading north? We're heading to the eastern portion of the wall because it's closer. With your 3D maneuver gear you should be able to scale the side of the wall with ease, correct? Yes, but what about? Then let's get moving. The sooner we get to the wall the faster you're out of here. I said before jumping off the edge of the building. Karen frowned, but followed soon afterwards. Why was I helping this girl? She was a deserter and if the military caught wind of this then she'd be executed, but she was willing to take that risk. This was another reason why I wanted to take Karen to eastern portion of the wall. There was less likely to be officers there, where there is almost a 100% chance they'd run into officers if they went north. I jumped over a street and saw, at the very end of it, a Titan. Shit, they move fast. It looked like Karen saw it too because her eyes bugged out. Relax and keep following me. We're almost there. I jumped over a few more buildings, but stopped when I saw the head of a Titan walking down the street in front of us. Looks like they've managed to get this far on the eastern flank. I said as I looked towards the south. There aren't many roads leading. No. Karen shouted as she grabbed the sides of her head. We were almost there. We're going to be fine. There doesn't look to be many around here, I stated, but she wasn't listening. Suddenly, Karen activated her gas and made straight towards the wall. What are you doing? I poured as much chakra into my legs as I could and shot after her. The Titan in front of us looked at Karen and reached out for her. The girl seemed blinded by her ambition to get out of the war zone because she charged forward without even seeing the danger she was in. Realizing I wasn't going to make it in time, I threw my right hook out towards the Titan that was lifting up its arm towards Karen. I applied wind elemental chakra into the top of the blade and when the hook connected with the Titan's arm it cut clean through. Dispelling the chakra from the hook, I yanked the hook back. The weapon lodged itself into the Titan's arm and I was shot forward at an even greater speed. From this position I won't be able to get to the back of its neck, I thought as I approached the creature that threatened Karen. I began building up chakra into my hand in a spinning motion. Looks like that leaves me with one option. The chakra in my hand continued to build up until a spinning blue ball swirled within my grasp. Rinnegan. The blue ball connected with the front side of the creature's neck, but the subsequent explosion sent waves of pressure and smoke around the point of contact. I landed onto the building behind me. Bits of flesh and blood shot past me as the smoke began to dissipate from the air. The necklace, and subsequently headless, Titan fell to the ground. The area behind its neck was all but obliterated. Blue steam rose from my hand as the remaining chakra from the jutsu dissipated. It's been a long time since I've used my chakra like that. Karen looked to have been blown onto the street below, where she watched as the Titan fell lifeless to ground in front of her. I jumped down next to her, my chains landing next to me a second afterwards. Are you okay? I asked. She was still staring at the lifeless Titan in front of us. Karen? The head of the Titan smashed into a window a few seconds after the words left my mouth. HHH. She began to stutter out. How did I do that? I said for her. She looked up at me, still shocked to the core. Maybe another time. But for now, I continued as I knelt down next to her. Don't you ever run blindly into danger like that again. Understood, finishing with an air of authority around me. I never shouted, and I'm not very good at scolding people, or interacting with people in general, but she needed to learn. Right, sorry about that. Karen said as she looked at my hand, still insanely curious about what just happened. I could tell she was embarrassed about her actions. She's a rookie and needed experience, but with experience comes danger. Now let's keep moving. We're almost there, I said as lent her a hand. She accepted my offering and stood up. We jumped from building to building, keeping our eyes peeled until stopping at a street. A smaller Titan, about 1 story tall, was slowly walking down the street. Blood was oozing out of its mouth and it was chewing on something. Karen gasped at the sight. Karen. The girl looked at me, tears threatening to breach her eyes. I placed a hand onto her shoulder. This is what the battlefield looks like. If you aren't able to be released from the military, then you must learn to expect this. She looked back down at the small titan as I continued. It's only going to get worse from here, and if you aren't prepared for it, then the battlefield will eventually come to you. I looked over at the girl, only to see more tears forming underneath her eyes. But I'm not a warrior, Karen replied. A lot of people aren't. Karen looked at me, surprised by my words. The majority of soldiers are just like you, scared. I looked over towards the wall. It's just they push that fear aside when they know what they're fighting to protect. I then jumped to the building across the street. Let's keep moving. The girl followed silently behind me, deep in thought. We landed onto a stretch of buildings that lined a large plaza. The plaza ran right up against the massive wall with several soldiers standing near it. Civilians? What are they doing here? Karen said aloud. Why haven't they been evacuated? The civilians were shouting at the few soldiers that were there. We jumped down to the ground and began making our way over to the group. There looked to be around 40 civilians and only 4 soldiers. What are you going to do now? We're stuck inside the city, a man shouted over the chorus of shouts. I looked over at the southern entrance to the plaza and saw a dead titan laying on the ground. 3 dead soldiers lay straight across the ground around the body of the titan. We are all going to die, a woman exclaimed as similar shouts continued to be sprouted out of the crowd. We threw the mob, pushing and shoving when necessary. It's another soldier, a rather large man from inside the crowd shouted. The group turned and saw Karen. Why aren't you on the front lines? The coward deserted. She's not fit to defend us. Karen looked down, shading her eyes with her hair. I frowned as I grabbed her hand, pulling her through the crowd. The shouts continued until finally we broke from the angry mob. Of the 4 soldiers, only one seemed to be keeping his cool under the situation. Name and rank? The apparent leader asked. Karen was standing slightly behind me, obviously nervous of the grizzled man. It took a moment for Karen to reply, but finally she did. Karen Pius of the 104th Trainee Division, left vanguard position. The stern man looked at her shoulder and saw that she was telling the truth. He then turned to me and grinned. And you must be the outsider. I suppose so, I replied. Karen gave me a confused glance at the nickname, but decided not to say anything. I guess everyone doesn't know my real name. Probably better this way. My name is Otto, and this is what's left of my squad, the man said as he pointed to the 3 other garrison soldiers, who were currently trying to calm the crowd. I bet you're wondering why there are still civilians inside the city. Well, it seems that the alarm squad that was detached to this sector of the town decided to desert rather than do their jobs. I could feel Karen clench onto the back of my cloak with one of her hands. The commanding officer couldn't see her do this, but I could feel the vibe of fear radiating off of her. I heard that the left vanguard took a beating. If the titans here are any consolation. Karen, Otto suddenly said. Karen let go of my cloak and stood next to me at attention. Looks like you're now a part of my squad. Check your gas and get ready to transport these civilians out of here. Otto walked away to the crowd to tell them the plan. I looked at Karen, who looked completely shocked at what Otto had said. Karen. The girl was completely lost, unmoving and unresponsive to anyone that called to her. Outsider. I looked over my shoulder to see Otto beckoning me over. I turned to walk over to the officer, but a hand grasped onto the side of my cloak. I looked down to see Karen holding onto it lightly. Gently, I placed a hand onto her shoulder, silently comforting her, before walking over to the man. I've heard rumors of your little excursion with the 3 titans outside the walls. Are you really able to fight against the titans without 3D maneuver gear? Yes. Good, because what I'm about to ask of you can only be done by you. Otto said. The civilians had stopped shouting and began preparing to move out. The gate is going to be closing soon and these people need to get out of here before that happens. The man pointed to a road that ran along the side of the wall heading north. The safest way to get these people out of here is to move them along the road that hugs the wall. That way there is only one direction the titans can approach us from. Otto turned back to me with a frown. And where do I come into this? Otto sighed at my question. I know you aren't a soldier, and you have every right to deny this order, but we need someone to cover our backs once we leave. Moving 40 civilians safely through the streets is going to take time, and if the titans end up coming up behind us then we'll be surrounded. And as you can see I don't have the manpower to do both. I see. Stay as long as you're able. Then retreat by any means possible. Otto said as he looked down to my hips. He knew that I didn't have 3D maneuver gear, and thus this was a suicide mission. At least, in his eyes it was. Fine, I'll stay for as long as possible under one condition. What's that? I'll need support if I'm going to hold them here, I said before pointing to Karen, who was now watching us from afar. I'd like to request that Karen stay here to support me. Karen? But she's just a trainee. I know, but I trust her. As you wish. Karen, said girl walked over to us. She still had that distant look in her eyes. Like she had been condemned to certain death. You're to support the outsider for as long as possible. Do you understand? Yes, sir. Karen replied with a gloom expression. Otto nodded and turned to me. Good luck, and thank you. You're the only one that can do this. It's fine, just get these people out of here. Will do. Otto said before shaking my hand. He turned to the crowd of people and raised his hand. Once we start moving there will be no stopping. Does everyone understand? The civilians all responded in the affirmative. Alright then, let's get the hell out of here. The 3 other soldiers sprang up onto the roof that led north along the street while the civilians filed out of the plaza. Otto gave us one last glance before following his men onto the roof. And with that, we were alone once again. I turned to Karen, who stared back at me. She was lost, confused, and scared. I don't want to fight. I know, but you asked. I know, so why? Because now you can leave. Karen stared at me, shocked at what I said. Leave, but what about holding off the Titans? I'll take care of the Titans. You have enough gas to make it up to the top of the wall, right? I do, but what about you? How will you? Karen jumped at my sudden outburst. This is what you wanted. To leave this battlefield and avoid the bloodshed. The ground began to shake as Titans grew near. Now go, before they arrive.
Karen hesitated, concern written all over her face, but with another rumble from the closing Titans, she turned her back to me and shot her ropes to the side of the wall.
Thank you. Karen whispered before shooting up the side of the wall. I sighed and looked at the southern entrance of the plaza. 2 Titans, one the size of the buildings next to it and another a foot shorter, walked into the plaza. I sighed as I walked towards the lumbering beasts. I began spinning the hook around beside me as I neared the creatures.
Took your time getting here. As quickly as I could run, I dashed towards the wall and ran up its side until I was at an angle that positioned me behind them. Kicking myself off, I flew behind the Titans, spinning at a rapid speed. My hook spun around me, slicing into the neck of the taller Titan. I landed onto the ground and quickly found that the smaller Titan had grabbed onto the chain connecting to my left arm.
The Titan pulled on the chain, sending me flying towards it. Lifting my free hand up to form a single sealed 2 clones appeared next to me. Take out its arms and legs. The clones nodded and dashed towards the Titan's legs. Lightning chakra began to form in their hands, swiftly moving down the metal of the chains and quickly began rippling across their chains and into the hooks. The clones sliced at the back of the Titan's knees, making it fall forwards onto its knees and making it momentarily convulse from the lightning running through its body. Once done, the clones dashed to the Titan's side and sliced off its hands. Once my chain was free, I began filling my hand with lightning chakra. The chakra began to spin until it formed a ball in my hand. Lightning chakra sprung from my hand, licking the ground beneath me as I ran towards the Titan, who had been attacking my clones. With its back turned, I ran up its back until I was at its weak point.
Raiden. Rinnegan. I smashed the ball into the back of its neck, creating a large explosion and sound wave that shot me backwards. Windows around the plaza burst apart while lightning arched in all directions from the point of impact. I landed on my feet a good 50 yards away, my clones landing a few seconds later on either side. 4 more Titans walked into the plaza from the southern and southwestern entrances.
Only for a while longer. I thought as my clones and I went to meet the Titans. XXXXX. Karen landed on top of the wall. I made it. She looked around and found that only the soldier walked over to her with a questioning expression on his face. Name and rank? The soldier asked. Karen Pius of the 104th Trainee Division. Karen replied with a salute. And what are you doing up here, soldier? You should be down there fighting. The soldier said. The soldier was probably at least 4 years older than her and was an officer of the garrison. A red band was worn around his left arm. My squad was overrun by the Titans, sir. I had no choice but, Karen began to say. You did have a choice, soldier. Your job was to slow down the Titan advance so non-combatants could be safely removed from the city. The soldier said as he pointed one of his swords at Karen. You deserted your comrades and spoiled your family's name. Karen backed away from the sword pointed at her, but stopped when an explosion rocked the ground beneath them. The girl looked over the edge of the wall only to see lightning arching up the side of the wall. The lightning fizzled out long before it reached the top of the wall. What are you doing down there? It then hit her that the man down there had helped her without even giving her his name. You brought shame to you and your family, Karen. You will be arrested for the desertion of your post and tried accordingly, the soldier said as he walked closer to her, seemingly unaffected by the explosion that occurred just moments before. He must have thought that the explosion was a stray artillery shell that landed beneath them because he was not in a position to see over the side of the wall. Still pointing his sword at Karen, the man began walking towards her while pulling out his other sword. Drop your weapons and come quietly. But Karen was paying little attention to the soldier. She was still looking down at the plaza as 4 more Titans walked into the square, and more could be seen making their way towards the plaza. He helped me get here without even giving me his name. He was willing to sacrifice himself just so I could have a chance to get out of the fighting. Karen thought as she clenched her hands into fists. Karen, lay down your weapons. The soldier repeated, but Karen quickly pulled out her swords and looked over at the man. What are you doing? I said. But before he could finish his sentence she was gone. XXXXX. I rode the back of a Titan to ground. its neck being sliced open and its body falling limp. The memories of one of my clones flooded my mind. I turned to see smoke coming from the mouth of one of the larger titans. 3 more, huh? There was now 5 titans inside the plaza. A dead titan lay on the other side of the plaza where one of my clones had killed another of the monsters. My eyes glanced over to the northern entrance of the plaza. Just a little more time. But I knew that there would be no end to the titans. When one fell, 3 more would replace it. I learned this firsthand the last time I fought against the titans. Bringing my hands up, I made a cross sign. Kage Bushin no Jutsu. 5 more clones appeared next to me. Let's buy those people sometime. You know what to do. The clones all nodded in unison before attacking the titans. I watched as they moved to attack, but I knew that the more clones I had out, the less combat effective they'd be. I grabbed onto the handles on my hooks and made my way to the enemy. One of my clones ran in front of me, used himself to throw me up into the air and above the titan. A titan to my left saw me and began heading towards us, but taking out the titan that was beneath me was my priority. Said titan watched as I flew down towards it and reached its hand out towards me. I spun in the air, dodging the arm while digging one of my hooks into its arm, slowing my descent. Kicking off the appendage, I was now midair behind the titan. With one hook out of position, and only one available to strike at the titan, I poured as much wind chakra into the weapon as I could. Hopefully this would be able to make an insertion wide enough to kill the beast. The wind-enhanced hook sliced into the neck of the titan. I landed on the ground, but before I could examine my handiwork I sidestepped out of the way of a hand trying to grab me. That was close. I looked up to see the titan staring back at me with those blank eyes which held no emotion. This one's faster than some of the others. I clenched onto my chains. But not faster than me. I went to move, but stopped when I saw someone flying past the back of the titan. The titan stopped moving and fell forwards. Tilting my head I looked over to see what happened, and to my surprise I saw Karen flying towards me. Karen? The girl landed next to me with a bright smile. What are you doing here? I asked. But something in her eyes had changed since the last time I saw her. What could have happened over the last quarter of an hour? Did some thinking when I made it to the top of the wall. Karen said, dropping the smile and gaining a more serious tone. And I can't just leave you to fight by yourself. Is that the only reason? I asked as I saw one of the titans take out another of my clones. One amongst a few others. Karen replied with a fire burning within her eyes. I grinned at this new side of Karen and nodded. Just be careful. If you're in danger then find one of my clones and use it as a distraction. I said. Karen gave me a confused glance at the prospective clone, but clearly decided that now was not the time to question me. We only need to hold this position for another 15 minutes tops. Understood. Karen replied. Fear could still be seen in her eyes, but a new confidence had overcome her. Where it came from, I couldn't even begin to guess. Then follow my lead. XXXXX. These things are never ending. Karen said to herself as she landed onto the ground near the wall. She has killed 2 titans and assisted in helping the cloaked man in killing 3 others. She watched as the man jumped off a dead falling titan and kill another one swoop. It was mesmerizing how this guy never wasted a movement. Every move allowed him to position himself to strike another target, reposition himself to support an ally, or land himself in area deemed safe. I won't ask him his name. Not yet, not until this is all over. I don't deserve to know. Karen thought as she detached her blades and rearmed them with fresh ones. I'm almost out of gas. I don't think I can make it up the side of the wall. She looked over at the cloaked man and smiled. I guess he never had that chance either. The cloaked man landed next to Karen. More keep coming. The man said as he watched about 10 clones fight against about 15 titans. How are you doing? Karen was panting, but smiled up at the black veil that hid his eyes. Fine. The man frowned, but nodded. Somehow Karen knew that the man knew she was lying. She had never fought in a battle, and it was taking its toll on her. But this guy barely seemed winded. Well, you're doing good for your first time. The man said. Battles with the titans rarely lasted this long without some form of retreat or reposition. For a first-timer, especially someone like Karen, to have lasted this long and killed 2 titans is a massive improvement. Thanks, Karen replied as he ran off into the fray once again. The girl soon followed, running back into the fight. What has come over me? She shot up into the air behind a titan. A clone saw this and used himself as a distraction so she could position herself behind the titan. The swords dug themselves into the titan's neck, killing it instantly. I was so scared of fighting, but now, Karen landed on top of a building on the northern side of the plaza before shooting off once again. I feel like nothing is weighing me down. The fear that once clouded my mind is gone. A voice was shouting as the girl flew through the air. She paid little attention as she shot her cords towards the wall. The cords connected, and just as she pulled the trigger to push herself forward, a smaller titan jumped up and yanked on the cord. Karen's eyes widened as she lost control onward towards the wall. I can't regain control. Karen desperately tried to control her flight, but the titan only tugged harder, destabilizing her even further. As she neared the wall, 2 hooks sliced through the 2 cables between herself and the titan that had grabbed the cords. Karen was free from the titan's grasp, but now had no way of controlling her trajectory. Just as she was about to impact the wall, a force slammed into her side, knocking her to the side and away from her crash course with the rock wall. Karen was facing the sky, 2 arms wrapped around her as she waited for the impact of the ground. After a couple of moments of anticipation, it finally came. The body beneath her slammed into the ground, smoke engulfing her soon afterwards. As soon as the smoke erupted, her back and head slammed into the cobblestone ground. Karen slid a good 10 yards before stopping. The world around her was fuzzy and the sounds of combat dulled out into a constant thump. She turned her head to the side and saw a black fuzzy figure approaching her. It knelt down next to her and began unstrapping her 3D maneuver gear from around her waist. The weight from the equipment fell off, releasing its pressure from her body. The figure picked her up, and with a quick burst of air, Karen felt like she was flying once again. I knelt down next to Karen, who looked to be nearly knocked out from the impact. It was a good thing my clone saw what happened, or else she'd be dead. Gently going through the motions, I detached her 3D maneuver gear. The titan that had grabbed a hold of Karen's cord was now making its way over to us, but one of my clones sliced its eyes out, making the titan go after it instead. Picking up Karen, I looked to the battle that was taking place and knew that more titans would eventually make their way to the plaza. I think we held them here for long enough. Jumping up to the wall, I began running up its side. About halfway up the wall, Karen began to stir in my arms. The young girl looked up at me, completely dazed and unaware of what was happening. "Feeling better?" I asked. She looked around before nodding. "Yeah, just a little hard to think and see, is all," Karen replied as she made herself comfortable in my arms. She didn't seem too surprised that I was running up the side of a wall, but then again, after everything she's seen from me, why would she be? I've learned that the girl in my arms was very adaptable, a good skill to have in this crazy world. "Can I ask you something?" I looked down at her with a questioning glance. What could she want? "Sure. What's your name?" I frowned, just now realizing that I never introduced myself to her. "Naruto Uzumaki." Karen nodded and went back to resting her eyes. With a strange name. I cleared the crest of the wall and landed as gently as I could. A soldier was staring at me with wide eyes. "Are you okay?" I asked. The soldier didn't respond at first, but shook it off. "Yes, is Karen going to be okay?" the soldier asked.
"She should be fine. Just knocked out from a good hit from a titan," I replied as I laid her down. "But she should still see a medic. Is there one around?"
"There's one on the northern part of the wall. I can take her there, but how did you?" the soldier asked, returning to his surprised expression from before. "Family secret." The man sighed before rubbing the back of his head. "Right, well, I better get her to a medic." He bent down and picked up the unconscious soldier. "What about you? You're not a soldier, and to be frank, I've never had this issue come up before." The man chuckled at his words. "Then again, I doubt anyone ever has." "Yeah, I doubt it," I replied as one of my clones walked up behind the man. "You wouldn't mind taking me to the commander of this operation, would you?" my clone asked. The soldier turned around and pointed at him, then back at me, then back at the clone. "This isn't the best time to stall, officer." The man shook off his shock once again. You're right. There's a battle raging on beneath us. No time to be surprised by." The soldier looked me up and down, the little things. I began walking away, but stopped when the soldier called out to me. "But what will you do? I've heard of the rumors, and saw what you did down there, but can you keep fighting?" "I've been fighting these things for longer than you can ever imagine," I replied, looking over my shoulder. "And I'll keep fighting them. For as long as it takes, and by any means necessary." I walked away from the group, southbound towards the destroyed gate. Nobody was up on top of this portion of wall. The artillery had all been moved to the northern portion of the wall, and all the soldiers had moved there as well. It seems that the soldiers atop the wall moved with the tide of the Titan's push. Probably just to make sure there was no desertion before the civilians had all been evacuated. It didn't take me long before I found myself standing just above the destroyed gate leading into Trust. The area had been demolished by the colossal Titan. Broken pieces of artillery, rail tracks, and other supplies littered the ground. Looking out across the valley in front of the gate, one could only see Titans coming from all directions. Fighting them all at once is going to be rough, I thought as more Titans walked into the city. The last time I fought this many. "Why am I not surprised?" a voice said from behind me. I turned and saw none other than Commander Pixis. "You really are something else, aren't you?" "You could say that," I replied as he walked up next to me. "What are you doing here?" "I could ask you the same thing," Pixis said as he took drink from his flask. "I just arrived about 15 minutes ago, trying to survey the area before I make any real decisions on what to do." Pixis turned and walked to the other side of the wall, facing the city. Who knows when the armored Titan will arrive? I walked next to the man. It's funny that he never asked about my clone, or the report that he was sure to have received from the soldier about what happened in the Eastern Plaza. It all happened so quickly. Was it the same as 5 years ago? Pixis took another sip of his alcohol, and shook his head. No, if it was like last time then the armored titan would have already busted through the second gate by now. That quick, huh? You can consider us lucky that it hasn't arrived yet. Even with that power of yours, I doubt you could stop that thing. I wouldn't count me out of the races just yet. I've got a few tricks up my sleeve. Like running up walls? Pixis asked with an amused look in his eye. Something a little more helpful than that, oh? Surprised, Pixis sighed as he rubbed the back of his head. As surprised as anyone would be after learning that a man can run up the side of walls and make physical copies of himself. I chuckled. I suppose that's true. I was surprised that the few people, them being Pixis, Karen, Ren, and the officer from before, were taking in this information so well. I assume you've got a plan? I've got a plan to stem the amount of titans entering Trust, by actually closing the gate, I said before patting him on the back. We'll leave up to you and your men. Out of earshot I could see 2 soldiers watching us as we talked. Stemming the bleeding will be extremely helpful when I come up with a plan to retake Trust, Pixis said, and it starts with somehow sealing that gate. I'll leave it to your expertise then. If there's anyone that can come up with a plan, then it's you. I appreciate your compliment, but what's your plan? Pixis asked as I walked back to the edge of the wall that faced the outside world. I need to know all the variables if I'm going to retake Trust. I'm going to do what my people do best, I replied, entering my mindscape as the words left my mouth and appearing in front of one of the 10 podiums. A crimson flame sat atop the podium, flickering ever so slightly when I appeared. And what's that? Pixis asked. I lifted my hand and pressed it into the flame, letting its soft embers engulf my hand. The power surge was immediate. My body was engulfed by the crimson flame, but I never felt the heat from the fire. I could feel the power course through my body, engulfing me with its friendly warmth. Outside my body I looked down at my hand to see crimson chakra rolling off in excess. It's been a long time since I felt this much power running through my body. I looked over my shoulder, my eyes completely coated by the bright crimson chakra. The whiskers that have always lined my cheeks thickened and my canines sharpened and grew. Killing. Chapter 3. Angel of Death XXXXX. What is this power? Pixis thought as a crimson wind began to swirl around the cloaked man standing in front of him. The grin that was plastered on his face was feral and menacing, and a feeling that a massive weight had suddenly appeared over every inch of his body. Pixis lifted his arm to cover his eyes from the dust that blew against him. What are you? The weight that pressed against his being was slowly becoming unbearable. Sweat began to form around his brow when his 2 bodyguards jumped next to him. Pixis looked to his flanks to see Rico and Ian in a defensive posture, but the pressure was taking its toll on them as well. Just as Pixis was about to collapse, Naruto disappeared from his spot in front of them, gone in the blink of an eye. Taking in a deep breath, Pixis wiped away the sweat from his forehead. Sir? Rico asked, concern and confusion laced in her voice. The commander of the Southern Garrison Forces sighed and grabbed his bottle from his coat. Don't ask. We've got a job to do just like he does. Pixis replied before taking a large gulp from his flask. And whatever you do, do not let a single soldier pass the middle mark on the walls. Yes, sir. But if I may ask, why's that? Ian asked with a salute. Because whatever Naruto's about to do out there should not be seen as of yet. We don't want a panic mob in our midst now, do we? Pixis asked when suddenly the ground shook as a massive explosion rocked the foundations of the wall. No sir, Rico and Ian replied with a concerned expressions. Good, now get to it. XXXXX. I ran down the side of the wall, crimson chakra flowing behind me. My chains following close behind as my eyes caught the sight of a titan nearing the opening of the destroyed gate. Pushing myself off of the wall, I sped towards the top of the unaware titan. Chakra began to spin in my hand as I neared the lumbering beast. Rinnegan. The red ball smashed into the top of its head, creating a massive explosion and pressure wave. A large plume of smoke flowed from the impact of the Rinnegan and the titan. Seconds rolled by before I walked out of the smoke, chains being dragged behind me. The smoke cleared by a gust of wind, showing a dead titan laying on the ground in front of the gate. A sea of titans met my eyes as images of my first contact with them appeared in my head. I've got a goal this time. Kill as many as possible until Pixis finds a way to close the gate. I thought as I poured chakra into both of my hands. Quickly the red formed in my hands, but a pain rippled throughout my body. The sudden influx of chakra was stretching my chakra coils, adding a strain that wasn't originally there. The same happened when I called upon Chome, but this pain hurt so much more than that time. That time. So much time has passed since then that my mind had begun to forget about the complete slaughter of those around me. Millions, no billions, were killed or eaten right before my eyes. I shrugged off those dreadful memories as my chakra had finally formed in my hands. 2 spinning red orbs sat in each of my hands. Wind swirled around each of the orbs as the sea of titans grew closer. Futon. Rasen Shuriken, XXXXX. In the trainees squad number 34, our team, Tomas Wagner, Nak Tees, Milius Zermuski, Mina Caroline, and Aren Jaeger. The aforementioned 5 bravely fell in the line of duty, Armin said between sobs. A Naruto clone sat on top of the roof behind Armin, listening to the sad report that Armin gave to Mikasa once she arrived. Naruto frowned at the news as he looked out over the roofs of Trost. To think that he died in the first battle with the Titans. The clone listened as Mikasa gave her harsh words to the other troops, shocking them into action, although she sounds dead inside. The clone moved over and sat on the edge of the roof as Mikasa charged off towards the HQ with the others in tow. He sighed and rubbed the back of his head in annoyance. She's going to get herself killed by the way she's moving. So the clone silently followed the group of trainees towards the HQ, killing any wayward Titan that approached them from the rear with his hooks. Just as the clone landed onto the top of a roof, Mikasa ran out of gas, slamming into the top of one of the buildings before falling into a street away from the group. The clone frowned before jumping over and landing onto a building overlooking Mikasa. She was downtrodden and looked as if all life had left her, as if her very purpose in this world had been stripped from her existence. Mikasa then began lifting one of her broken blades towards her throat. The clone lifted a brow from beneath the veil of his hood in question. Suicide? That won't solve anything. Just as the thought ran through his head, a Titan appeared in front of her, then another behind her. Slowly the 2 Titans began walking towards her, but something was off about the Titan behind Mikasa. I won't give up, not now, not when I have to preserve your memory, Mikasa suddenly shouted as the Asian girl held out her broken blade in front of her. A soft chuckle escaped the clone's lips as a new fire appeared in her eyes, but Naruto's eyes again landed on the long-haired Titan behind her. Its eyes were staring directly at the other Titan, as if it didn't even register that Mikasa was there. Also, the clone couldn't shake the feeling of familiarity when looking at its face. I could save her, but I think, just as the clone thought this, the Titan behind Mikasa charged forth, aiming its fist at the other Titan. Interesting, a Titan attacking another Titan. Out of the corner of Naruto's eyes he caught a glimpse of Armin swooping down and picking up Mikasa from the street. The 2 landed onto the same building as Naruto, about 20 yards away. Mikasa, you fell off because you ran out of gas, right? Armin shouted, but his look or eagerness dissipated when he heard the sound of metal clanking against the tiled rooftop. The 2 looked over and saw a black cloaked figure walking towards them. And Naruto? The clone stopped in front of them and nodded his head in confirmation. What are you doing here? Armin asked as Mikasa stared at me with a new sense of purpose and meaning. I thought all civilians had been evacuated? Making sure your top of the class doesn't get herself killed. Naruto replied as he began reeling in one of the hooks towards him. Once it was by his side, the cloaked man began spinning it around at his side. But how did you? Armin began to say, but stopped when Connie landed next to them. Hey guys, we need to get moving. There are 2 15-meter classes in front of us, Connie exclaimed. I wouldn't worry about that, Mikasa said as Armin fiddled with her equipment without her realizing it. What are you talking about? Of course I'm going to worry, Connie exclaimed. Watch, I said to the young boy. Connie looked at me with a confused expression before looking at the 2 Titans. He must have just noticed that Naruto had been standing there. The long-haired Titan then plowed its fist into the opposing Titan, sending its head flying towards the group standing on the building nearby. Watch out, Connie shouted as he moved to get out of the way, but then a black blur shot past them. Naruto now stood in front of the group of trainees, his hooks and chains glowing a bright blue while he rapidly spun them by his side. Wind was whirling around him, blowing his cloak about before the head was right in front of him. Naruto shot his hooks upwards, slicing the head in 2 and sending the pieces of the head to the streets on either side of them. The chains quickly stopped glowing blue before landing by his side once again. Naruto looked over his shoulder at the Ostracan trainees. Are you all okay? This seemed to snap them out of their stupor as Mikasa and Armin stood from their seated position. Why yeah, we're fine, Armin replied. What was that? Mikasa asked. I would suggest saving the questions for later. For now we need to get everyone to the HQ. Naruto, there's no time for questions. We need to get to the HQ and fast. The others have already moved on ahead, Connie exclaimed. But I'm out of gas, how am I supposed to get to HQ without any gas? Mikasa asked. Don't worry about that. I put all of my gas into your tank and replaced all of your blades with my own. You should be able to make it to the HQ from here, Armin said, but there was a sad smile adorning his features. It's the least I can do. But what about you? How will you get to the HQ? Connie asked. Armin sighed deeply and looked down at the remaining blade in his hand. I'll be fine, just get to the HQ. Mikasa then walked over and grabbed Armin's blade and threw it over the edge of the building. What are you doing? We are not leaving you behind. I won't let another person close to me die, Mikasa said with determination. Naruto grinned slightly at the scene, but suddenly the ground beneath them began to shake as a loud explosion pierced their ears. "What was that?" Connie exclaimed. The clone looked south towards the gate, where one could see a bright light shining up from over the top of the wall. A breeze pressed against them as soon afterwards another explosion, equal in strength, erupted from the other side of the wall, shaking the ground a second time with equal force. "It seems like the boss has made it outside," the clone thought before turning towards the group. They all looked confused and terrified at what was going on. For all they knew, it was another attack on the wall by the colossal titan. "It's best if we keep our focus on the objective at hand and get to the HQ." The group looked skeptical, but nodded their heads as they stood up. Armin looked over at the renegade titan when an idea appeared in his head. "Look guys, I know this may sound crazy, but what if we use that titan to get to the HQ?" "Use a titan for help? That sounds crazy." But, Connie said as he watched the abnormal titan make its way over to the nearest traditional titan. "It's the only chance we've got," Mikasa said. Naruto watched as the abnormal titan began to destroy another titan at the end of the next street over. Naruto's eyes narrowed slightly as a thought came to his mind. The clone's eyes met with the titan's, and said Titan seemed to pause for a moment before continuing on. "But what about this guy? He doesn't have any 3D maneuver gear. How will he keep up?" Connie asked. "Don't worry about me. I'll follow you too while taking care of Armin," Naruto said as he began wrapping up his chains around his arms. "I need to conserve chakra if I don't want to disappear. Helping these trainees takes top priority for now." "Again, how? You don't?" I said, "Don't worry about me. I'll take care of Armin. You two clear a path for that titan to get to HQ." Naruto replied with a voice that said, "Don't test my patience." Mikasa frowned at the thought of a stranger taking care of Armin, but mentally conceded that it was the only option at hand. "Fine, but don't you dare drop him or I'll kill you myself," Connie said as he pulled out his two blades. Mikasa following suit a few seconds later. With one last look from the Asian girl, Connie and Mikasa jumped away to begin their mission. "You have some very protective friends," Naruto said once Mikasa and Connie were out of earshot. "I don't know why. Eren was killed saving my life. Why would they still even like me after something like that?" Armin asked, looking up into the veil of Naruto's hood. The cloaked man sighed and looked towards the south. A massive red light appeared behind the wall, washing a strange warmth over the city. "Armin, Eren died protecting you. He valued your life higher than his own," Naruto said as he placed a hand onto Armin's shoulder. "If you were in the same position, wouldn't you have done the same thing as Eren?" The blonde looked down at the top of the building for a moment. "He's right, I would have done the exact same thing without a second thought." "Now," Naruto said, breaking his train of thought, "let's get going before we fall too far behind." "Right," Armin replied, a new sense of conviction overcoming him. XXXXX, this power. I swept past 5 titans. A few seconds later their necks exploded in spray of crimson blood. It feels so familiar. Landing onto the back of a titan, I dug my crimson-soaked blades into the back of its neck, killing it instantly. The titan fell forward as 2 clones appeared next to me, running towards 2 other titans approaching at my flanks. The 2 clones jumped towards their chests and erupted in a massive explosion, sending body parts flying in all directions. Bunshin Deibakuha. I straightened my back and looked around me. Standing in the center of the field outside the walls, a sea of titans approached me from all sides. Sighing, a clone was created behind me with its back to mine. We began going through similar hand signs as the titans encroached onto us. Just as persistent as before, I said softly as my clone and I finished our replicated hand signs at the same time. Kaden. Goka Mekyaku. A massive wave of fire erupted from our mouths, flowing over the titans as they mindlessly walked into the searing hot flames. We continued to spray fire into the titans until I noticed that some of them had begun to push through the flames. The clone and I stopped the jutsu simultaneously, and once the smoke had cleared, a field of charred and mangled bodies remained within the range of our jutsu. A soft pop could be heard behind me, notifying me that my clone had used all of its chakra. I feel like I've seen that jutsu used by someone, I thought as I saw some of the titans that had managed to push through the fire come close to me. Disappearing from where I stood by applying the red chakra to my legs, the 7 burnt and mangled titans dropped to the ground after the top portions of their bodies exploded one after the other. Some of the titans that had fallen to the ground from the fire jutsu had begun to restore parts of their body. I landed at my original location before an image drove itself into my mind, drilling itself to my foremost thought. A man had just been blown across the top of some sand from a wind jutsu. He had long black hair and red samurai armor. He picked himself up off the ground and brushed himself off before running through some hand seals. Kaden. Goka Mekyaku. The sea of fire engulfed the horizon as 15 to 20 men lined up to fire a water jutsu to oppose the one man. The wind that was created from the colliding forces of fire and water could have been a jutsu all its own. Frowning, I formed a cross-hand sign. Kage Bushin. 10 clones appeared around me before dashing into the regenerating titans that lay in the burnt terrain. Beyond them more titans could be seen moving towards my position. Some walking, others sprinting, but they would eventually come. They always did. The chakra inside my body continued to expand and make room for itself, but the process was becoming less and less painful. My body was adjusting to the constant stream of outpouring chakra from the seal within my body. Looking down at my body, I could see the red wisps of chakra pouring out from every pore of my body. Excess chakra that was released from the seal that could not be contained within my ever-expanding chakra system. The chakra, it seems, was eager to absorb itself into my body. Memories entered my mind from a destroyed clone that had completed its work in killing off any stragglers. It seems they have begun walking over their dead. What mindless creatures. Lightning began to sparkle from my hands as another clone popped away behind me. But they do seem rather eager today. The lightning ran down my chains and into my hooks that lay on the grass behind me. Disappearing from my position inside the devastated geography, I reappeared inside the center of a group of 4 titans. Spinning rapidly, the hooks cut deeply into the skin of the titans, electrocuting them and sending them to the ground. The lightning continued to course through their bodigal sign in front of me. Raiden. Zoki Haretsu. The titans around me began to shake violently before becoming unmoving. Every organ in their body ruptured until their heads exploded from the pressure inside their bodies. Going through the motions, I sliced off a chunk from the back of their necks before moving on to the next titan. XXXXX, I'm running low on chakra. At this rate, the clone carrying Armin hopped from one building to another. Following behind the 2 trainees as they moved the abnormal titan towards the now swamped HQ. Titans could be seen crawling all over the building, signifying that there was still a holdout of soldiers left inside. I only have enough chakra for 3 to 4 jutsu left before I dispel. Conservational fighting is my best tactic at this point, but this constant running is beginning to wear into my chakra reserves as well. Looking over his shoulder, Naruto could see Armin looking beneath them in amazement. How are you jumping like this? This is amazing, Armin said as Naruto carried Armin on his back. I thought I told you, save the questions for later. Getting out of trust is our top priority at this juncture. Naruto replied, a hint of irritation on his voice. The blonde looked slightly stunned, but regained his serious expression. Still, the boy was extremely curious as to what was going on and who could blame him. We're about to enter the HQ, get ready, Naruto said with an even tone. The clone could feel Armin's arms tighten around his neck as he went to jump towards the window that Mikasa had broken through. Kicking off of a nearby building, the 2 flew over 2 titans before the clone nimbly landed on the floor of a room. A dozen or so soldiers stood inside the room, but none of them heard the 2 enter as they were watching 2 titans get smashed by the abnormal titan. Putting Armin down, Mikasa and Connie looked over at us, relief apparent in their eyes. Glad to see you 2 make it. When you 2 didn't arrive shortly after us, I feared the worst, Connie said as he slapped Armin on the back. The blonde was pushed forward from the sudden motion. Why yeah. Sorry about that. Naruto and I just had a little talk is all, Armin replied while rubbing the back of his head. Mikasa frowned when she heard this, but declined to say anything. Whatever, your plan worked like a charm, Mikasa, and I already told everyone about the titan that's attacking all the others outside. So long as it's here, then we should be safe inside the HQ, Connie said with a massive smile on his face. Then the room turned to the clone who was looking out the window that they had plunged through just moments before. Who's he? Jean asked. He doesn't look like a soldier to me. Reiner commented. Hey, who are you and why were you not evacuated with the civilians? Naruto remained quiet as he observed Reiner. This feeling, I felt it before when I was near Ren and Annie. Hey, answer me, Reiner demanded. He's a friend, Armin exclaimed, quickly moving next to the cloaked man. Naruto carried me all the way here on his back. Looking up beneath my dark veil, he smiled softly. He saved my life from being eaten by the titans outside. Naruto, is it? Then why didn't he say that himself? Jean asked. There's a problem with his throat at the moment. It restricts his speech and makes him violently cough if he talks too much, Armin explained. The group of soldiers seemed to accept his answer except for Reiner, but the tall soldier remained quiet for the time being. Welcome to our little slice of hell then, Naruto, but we aren't out of the woods yet. There are titans downstairs that are currently blocking us from getting any more gas, Jean explained before turning to the others to erect a plan to recapture the basement. So that's the problem, the clone thought as he began walking away. I can take these out before dispelling. Naruto exited the room and began walking down the hallway when a voice made itself known to the mantled man. Naruto? Where are you going? Looking over his shoulder, he could see Annie staring back at him with eyes that reflected both boredom and curiosity. Going to have a look around, the clone responded. Is that so? Mind if I tag along? Annie asked as she fully removed herself from behind the door she was peering out of. If you wish. Walking away, Naruto could hear the footsteps of Annie quicken before she was walking by his side. The two remained quiet as they walked around the HQ, moving ever closer to the basement. What about the others, won't you be included in their plan to secure the basement? They'll tell me the plan when we return, Annie said as the two stopped in front of an elevator. Is this the elevator that leads down to the basement? Yeah, I see. Naruto sighed and looked over at the blonde girl standing next to him. She was neither scared nor worried about anything that was going on around her. Why did you want to follow me? Annie thought for a moment, thinking deeply before shaking her head, a slight grin appearing on her face. I'm not entirely sure myself. I just kind of felt like it, I guess. In truth, Annie has never taken an interest in anyone before. Everyone around her was just a faceless person that meant nothing in her eyes, but Naruto, the man standing next to her, felt like a shadow that she aspired to be. A strong obstacle that Annie needed to overcome to be the very thing that she, along with her father, wanted her to become. But was there anything else? Was this just a one-sided affair where Annie saw Naruto as a rival while he saw her as nothing more than a pest that was in the way? Or is there something else between them besides the feeling of competition? She has only talked to the man once before, but they exchanged their thoughts through their fists. In that quick spar, Annie learned a lot about how the mysterious man, but he was withholding a lot of strength. Each punch and kick made it seem like he was trying to not hurt her. Annie, are you okay? Naruto asked, shaking her from her thoughts. Yes, I'm fine. We should head back to the others. We've wasted enough time as it is. Annie replied before quickly turning and walking away. The blonde continued to walk in the direction in which they came until she heard an audible tick of a gate closing. Annie turned to see Naruto pressing the button for the elevator to descend into the basement. What are you doing? Annie exclaimed as she ran to the edge of the elevator, but it was already too low for her to do anything. Naruto didn't respond as the elevator disappeared into the darkness below. Shocked, Annie stared at where Naruto had just been before turning and running in the opposite direction. What the hell is he thinking? He's going to die down there, bursting through the doors. The blonde girl looked at the stunned looks of everyone inside the room. Annie, what's the matter? Jean asked. This was the first time they had seen her terrified like this. Naruto went into the basement by himself, Annie said after she had slightly composed herself. The room went silent. Wait, what? He's going to die if he goes down there alone, Armin shouted as he quickly stood. I know. I'm going to save him, Annie said as she grabbed a container that was half full of gas and left the room. Wait, Annie. Reiner shouted, but the blonde girl was gone. Shit, we got to stop her. But just as Reiner was about to grab another canister, Mikasa grabbed the one he was reaching for and dashed through the door. The floor beneath them rumbled somewhat as Mikasa disappeared through the door. The Asian girl quickly caught up to Annie as she made her way down the stairs. Decided to come with me? Mikasa looked at her fellow soldier and nodded her head. He may be mysterious, but he did save Armin's life. The least I can do is save his. Besides, Mikasa said with a now confused expression, it's unlike you to go out of your way for anything, especially another person. Yeah, I know, Annie replied as the two stopped in front of the door. Liadi. Ready? Mikasa asked. Annie nodded before the two burst through the door and into the dark basement, but when their eyes landed on the scene before them, they were awestruck. Standing at the center of the room, surrounded by dead titans and blood up to his ankles, stood Naruto. 2 chains lay in the pool of blood next to him as said blood was steaming up into the air, along with the bodies of the deceased titans. Turning his body, Naruto was now facing the completely stunned trainees with an expressionless face, but after a few seconds of staring, Naruto suddenly burst into a cloud of smoke. What was that? Mikasa asked as the two girls walked through the steaming blood and corpses towards where Naruto had been standing, but there was nothing there. Where did Naruto go? Annie asked. The two looked around, but there was nothing. How could someone just disappear in a puff of smoke like that? We're here to Connie shouted as he burst through the door, but came to a stop when he saw the dead titans laying on the ground. Help. Several others came through the door, but were also stunned by the scene. Did you too? Reiner asked. No, it wasn't us, Annie said as she examined the handiwork of their cloaked friend. Then what happened? And where's Naruto? Connie asked. Naruto killed these titans, but as to where he's gone, Mikasa said as she pulled down on her red muffler somewhat. We don't know. He disappeared in a puff of smoke when we walked through the door. Disappeared in a puff of smoke? What the hell are you two talking about? Jean asked in confusion. I wouldn't have believed it if I hadn't seen it myself either, but Mikasa is telling the truth, Annie said, still looking around the large room. Is he? To be able to kill 7 titans by himself. That's insane, Reiner commented. It doesn't matter, the room is clear for now. Let's fill up and get the hell out of here, Jean said, getting nods from everyone else. XXXXX. A headless titan fell to the ground in front of me, but as I yanked my hook out from the back of its neck, a massive hand descended down upon me. I jumped away from the attack just as it smashed into its fellow titan. Moving through hand signs as I jumped backwards, I held out my hands in front of me once I was done. Futon. Kazikiri no Jutsu. A gust of wind flew past me as blades of air formed in front of the beasts. The blades cut through the titan all over its body, but lethally on the back of its neck. The offending titan, along with 2 others standing on its other side, fell to the ground, dead. Landing on the ground, a titan standing behind me plowed me into the ground, only for smoke to erupt from underneath its fist. Appearing behind it, my hook dug into the back of its neck, killing it instantly. I wonder how long Pixis is going to take, I thought after landing onto the charred grass. Looking around me, I noticed the nearest titan was a little ways away, but then memories flooded into my mind. So Ren was killed. At least one of my remaining clones had managed to help out the other trainees. Seeing 10 or so titans come closer, I again ran through hand signs before slamming my hand into the ground. Raiden. Areopagi. Lightning began arcing from my hand before, quick as lightning, it shot out in all directions, ripping up the ground as it danced to the nearest titans. The titans that had once been rushing me fell to the ground, steam coming from their charred bodies. But that abnormal titan. It feels like 2 clones appeared next to me and rushed the downed titans. I shook my head as I looked around me. At least these titans never made it inside the city. But more came as another massive wave of titans appeared to the south of my position. Always eager to rush to your deaths, I said as red chakra began to swirl around my body. The air around me began to heat up as, if one looked very closely, my body began to twitch ever so slightly. Using this technique will probably hurt due to the lack of conditioning, but I suppose I should go help Pixis come up with a plan if he's taking this long. This should give us at least 15 to 20 minutes at most before more arrive.
The sea of titans grew ever closer as chakra began to flow around me in a mesmerizing dance. Although it would normally be invisible to the naked eye, the red chakra allowed it to be visible to everyone. Swiftly applying lightning chakra in one hand, and wind chakra in the other, I weaved them together in front of me. The 2 differentiating chakra fused together and burst into my body at a blinding speed. Jinten. Akuma no Iki. 1.
And then, in the blink of an eye, the sea of titans exploded in blood. XXXXX Pixis stood motionless as he watched the massive horde of titans simply explode in blood. How could someone be so powerful? To kill over 50 titans in an instant could only be done by the will of a god. HHH. Pixis dropped his flask on the ground as the blood rained down onto the ground. Some of the blood began to pool into the bottom of 2 massive craters made by the explosions at the beginning of the fight. I see you haven't made much progress in figuring out a plan to retake trust. A familiar voice said from behind Pixis. The stunned commander nearly fell off the wall in surprise. What in the world are you? Pixis exclaimed. A relic of the past. I said between pants. The crimson chakra that had flowed around me was no longer visible to the southern garrison commander as the last jutsu used up a large portion of my reserves. Not only did it use a massive amount of chakra, but it put an incredibly high amount of strain on the body. It also seems that, like Chomi, a large portion of the chakra being released from the seal is returning to make sure it doesn't break. Their chakra is the only thing holding it together and the 9 tails is playing a large in that. The amount of pressure that had been flowing off of me from before had vanished and Pixis was having a much easier time breathing, but after watching my display of power, the bald man took a few steps back. I watched as Pixis took several steps back and sighed. There isn't much use in taking a few steps back like that. If I wanted to kill you then I would have done it long before you even registered I was here. Pixis stopped his motion and looked at my eyes. My hood was down and I had purposely recalled the demonic chakra from my eyes to make them the same blue as before. I'm still the same chess-playing man as before and I'll continue to work in humanity's favor. You can count on that. Pixis stared into my eyes for a couple of moments before kneeling down and picking up his flask from the ground. After taking a massive gulp of alcohol, Pixis nodded his head before walking over to the edge of the wall that faced the city. You're crazy, you know that right? Am I? I replied as I stood next to the aged commander. We looked out over city that had hundreds of titans walking through it. My last attack should give us about 20 minutes tops of breathing room before more arrive. Can you do whatever you just did again? Except this time inside the city? Pixis asked. I looked down at my body and frowned. While my chakra was being rapidly replenished, my muscles were a different story. No, I can fight traditionally inside the city, but that specific move, or anything of the same scope, won't be an option for a while. I replied as we began walking across the top of the wall towards the northern end. Did you find a way to close the hole? I have some ideas, but actually executing them seems impossible at the moment. Tell me, do you have a move that could close the wall? Pixis asked. No, all of my abilities are made with 2 purposes in mind. And those would be killing and destroying. While neither of those will help in closing the walls. Indeed, they won't. We approached a line of soldiers that were standing guard at about the halfway point on the wall. Quickly placing the hood back over my head, the men saluted Pixis as we passed. Sir, we hear explosions to the south of Trost. If I may ask. One of the soldiers began to say, but Pixis waved him off. You may not, now stand guard until I give the order not to. Pixis said sternly. The soldier saluted and nodded his head. Once we were out of earshot I looked at Pixis questionably. I ordered for nobody to go beyond the halfway mark so that whatever you did out there would remain a secret for as long as possible. A good idea, but people will learn eventually. True, but for now we don't need to start a panic amongst the men. We were walking along the northern portion of the wall when we heard the loud bang of an artillery cannon. I wonder what that was about. Pixis wondered aloud as we approached the cannon that fired the shell. It was pointing inwards towards the corner of the wall. The soldiers that stood next to the cannon began reloading when we stopped behind them. Now why fire a cannon in that direction? The soldiers all turned around and saluted Pixis in unison. Sir, it was by request of second-in-command Kits that we aim it inwards, the lead gunner said. Why would that man ever want to do something like that? Pixis asked. Because of the soldier known as a Ren Jaeger, sir, the soldier said, gaining my immediate attention. It seems that the boy can turn into a titan. Pixis and I looked at one another in confusion before looking over at the scene below. Smoke covered the area and one could see something massive underneath. I suggest we go down there and see what exactly is happening. People tend to do unwarranted things when they are afraid. Agreed. Do not fire another shell unless I give the direct order to do so. Naruto. Pixis said, gaining my attention. Would you be so kind as to accompany me? Of course. I replied as we walked onto a wooden elevator that sat behind the cannon. We took it down to the bottom to the wall and walked into the city. Soldiers lingered about talking to one another as to what was going to happen next. Moving through them was easy as the majority moved out of the way when they saw Pixis. We arrived behind the line soldiers to hear Armin giving a valiant speech in defense of his friend. The steam that covered the ground had cleared and Kits was holding his hand up in the air like he was going to fire another shot. But Pixis and I both knew that it would never happen unless he ordered it to be so. How about we end this little drama here and now, shall we? Pixis said as he moved next to Kits. I stood next to Pixis with an emotionless visage about me. I watched as the half-titan crumpled to the ground behind Armin. So it's true. A Ren can turn into a titan. I had my suspicions before, but now, I thought as I looked at the young soldier. He looked composed, but scared and lost. I bet he didn't even know he could do this before now. Armin and Mikasa stared at me in disbelief. Naruto, how did you? Mikasa began to say, but was cut off by Pixis. I think I would like to have a little chat with these three. You take care of the reinforcements, kids. But what about the outsider? Surely he should. Kits began to say. Take care of the reinforcements, kids. I'll handle things here. Pixis said once again, but this time there was a dangerous edge to it. As you wish, Commander, Kits said before walking away. Everyone, you are dismissed. Pixis ordered. The soldiers that had once surrounded Eren, Mikasa, and Armin began to move away from the trio. Ever since you showed up, things just keep getting weirder and weirder today. I chuckled softly at Pixis's words before following him down to meet the three stunned soldiers. Please, if you would follow me, Pixis said before turning and walking away. Eren was helped up by Mikasa, but said Asian girl, and Armin looked at me for a second before following Pixis. Sighing deeply, I turned and began to follow the others, but out of the corner of my eye I could see three people that I recognized standing atop a nearby building. They, too, were staring at me with what could only be identified as confusion and surprise. XXXXX, you disappeared in a puff of smoke, Mikasa said as she jabbed her finger into my chest. Pixis was standing off to the side talking to Armin and Eren about what was going on while I was lending a spare ear to the description of Eren's ordeal. Did I? I replied with a blank expression. The veil of my hood covering the top portion of my face. When would I be allowed to show my face in public? This was getting extremely annoying. Annie and I both saw you disappear surrounded by dead titans in the basement of the HQ. Mikasa said with a little more assertiveness. How did you manage to escape the city without 3D maneuver gear, and how did you kill those titans by yourself? Do you really expect me to tell you? Mikasa looked slightly shocked at my answer, but remained calm. She must have known this was how I was going to answer. If I wouldn't tell Eren, then why would you expect me to tell you my secrets? That's true, but 3 of those titans' bodies were blown apart. Like some sort of explosive had ripped their necks from their bodies. Mikasa thought as she began to grit her teeth together. Naruto. I think we've come up with a plan, Pixis said. Okay, let's hear it. I replied as Mikasa and I walked over to the other group. Furthermore, Pixis seems to be keeping Naruto close at all times. What kind of VIP is he? Mikasa asked herself. Armin here thinks that, with Eren's titan strength, we could move that boulder there, Pixis said as he pointed towards a massive rock somewhat near the blown open gate, all the way over to the hole in the wall. I looked over at Armin, who seemed to shuffle under my gaze, then over at Eren. He still looked confused and lost, but he did have the power to close that gate, something I did not possess. Are you sure you can do this, Eren? I asked. Can you control your titan powers in order to get the job done? The young soldier stayed quiet for a while, looking down at his knees as he mulled over the thought in his head. Pixis then took a step forward. It's not that you can't be sure, but it's something you have to do, Pixis then said. The armored titan could show up at any moment, and if we don't close that hole now, then we risk losing everything. The elder commander then kneeled down in front of Eren so they were face to face. So let me repeat Naruto's question, can you do this? With a new sense of devotion and determination, Eren stood and nodded his head. I'll get that gate closed, no matter what. I smirked while Pixis smiled. Good, now we just need to calm the troops. Eren, follow me. Pixis said as he walked over to the edge of the wall. Yes sir, Eren said as he followed Pixis. XXXXX. Why has only one memory returned since I released the Biju's chakra? I thought as I looked out across the top of the city. Currently I was sitting on the edge of the wall with one leg dangling over the side and the other propped onto the corner. 20 minutes has already passed and the Titans had begun entering the city once more, but I was delighted to hear that my efforts had saved many lives. Many soldiers were able to retreat with little to no resistance thanks to you. Your efforts saved countless lives, and for that I thank you, Pixis said with a firm handshake. So this is going to be where I enter, a voice said from behind me. Yeah, I replied as Eren took a seat next to me. Nervous? I'll get it done, Eren replied as he stared at the giant rock. I didn't reply, and the young soldier seemed to get the "you aren't telling me the truth" feeling. Okay, yes I'm nervous. Yes I'm scared. This whole damn operation is riding on the belief that I can activate and control this Titan power that they have so nicely dubbed it. Eren then fell back onto the ground, staring up into the sky. A power that I don't even know I can control. What if something goes wrong? What if I lose control when I turn into a Titan like before? I continued to listen to the young soldier vent his concerns as I continued city. Before, it all seemed like a dream. Like I was just angry and wanted to take my rage out on the things that force us to hide behind these walls. Eren said as he reached his hand out towards the sky. Life would so much easier if I was just a cloud in the sky. Watching the world below from the safety of the clouds. An image of a black-haired man then shot itself into my head. Like a picture suddenly was imprinted to the forefront of my thoughts. He was wearing a green vest and had a cigarette hanging from his lips. His black hair was tied into a ponytail on the back of his head. He was laying on the grass as he stared up into the clouds above. 2 words were inscribed on the bottom of the photograph, how troublesome. Well, somebody has to be the one in your shoes, I replied. What do you mean? If it wasn't you then it would be someone else. Maybe someone who is less capable and holds less conviction. I then laid back along with Eren, my hood falling off my head. I'm just glad it's you is all I'm saying. Eren smiled before putting his arm down. I got a question. Why are you not scared? What would I be afraid of? Being eaten by those things. I chuckled at his choice of words. Remember you're one of those things now too. Hey, just because I can turn into a Titan doesn't make me one, Eren exclaimed in mock anger. Hey, I suppose you're right, but the reason I'm not scared, I said as I pushed myself to a sitting position once again, is because I've been fighting them for such a long time. I guess I've just grown accustomed to a world full of Titans. Accustomed? What are you Eren began to say as my eyes veered to the side to see someone walking up to us. That, my friend, is classified information, Pixis said as Eren quickly stood and saluted his commander. Said commander walked up to me and placed my hood over my head and patted me on the shoulder, gaining a confused glance from Eren, but a disgruntled sigh from me. You'll be able to take it off once this is all over. Bear with it for now. Sorry sir, I didn't realize that it was classified, Eren exclaimed. I sighed and lifted my body up to a standing position as well. Got the details hammered out? I asked. I suppose it's only right to keep things under wraps until after the end of this battle. We barely managed to calm down the troops after Eren stirred them up, but Pixis did do a marvelous job in flipping the situation to work in his favor. That man truly is a great commander. We do, and we've got 2 choices that lay before us. Pixis responded. Either I send down an elite squad of men, which includes Mikasa, to escort Eren, or we send Naruto. Permission to speak sir, Eren said, go ahead. Why would Naruto go by himself? Why not send both? Pixis grinned as he looked at me. Naruto is very capable, and has done several acts of heroism that could never be accomplished by even my most elite men. The reason he would go by himself is because his techniques are strictly classified and will remain so until further notice. I'm sure that's not the only reason, there's something that he's not telling us. Now, the reason I bring up 2 choices is on the premise of your comfort. My comfort? Eren asked. This whole operation is riding on the fact that you can turn into a Titan and move that rock. If having either Mikasa in the team, or Naruto, improves these odds then we should take it. The choice is up to you. Sighing, Eren took a few steps away from us to mull over his options. Once he was out of earshot, Pixis turned to me. Are you feeling up to it? After your fight outside the walls you seem winded. Can you properly escort Eren if he chooses you? My body had long since replenished its chakra due to the outpouring of chakra from the seal, but my physical performance was another question. I could still fight, but using Jinten-based jutsu was not advisable. While I may have the chakra to cast it many times over, my body can simply not take the pressure of such a high-speed jutsu when used multiple times over. Ever since I began running from the Titans, my physique has changed to cardio and long-distance running. Quick sudden bursts of speed at that level would require me to retrain my body and obtain the resistance necessary to use it more than just a single time before feeling the repercussions. If I'm going to be fighting the Titans more often, then it looks like I'm going to have to train my body for combat after hundreds of years of running. I'll be able to cover him, don't worry, I replied. Oren then walked up to us with his eyes set on me. I'd like Naruto to escort me. Oh really? I thought for sure you'd like your childhood friend to be there with you, Pixis said. I agree. Are you sure you wouldn't want Mikasa there with you? I pressed. I had only met him a few days before. Why would he choose me over someone he has known his entire life? No, I would rather have Naruto escort me, Oren said with a curt attitude. Did something happen between the two? If that is your decision, then I will respect it. You two are to deploy when we give the signal on the northwestern part of the wall, Pixis said. What's the signal? Oren asked. A green flare will be fired, so be prepared. Pixis said before turning to me. Naruto, may I have a word? Nodding my head, I followed Pixis a few feet away. With our backs to the young soldier, he handed me a flare gun with 4 different colored flares. Take this and use it when the time comes. Fire the green one if the operation is a success. Fire the red one if you are aborting early. Fire the yellow one if there has been a delay, but the operation is still going to be continued. And finally, fire the purple one if everything has gone terribly wrong and aborting is impossible. But when Pixis handed me the purple flare, he looked extremely grim. I know that these Titans will have a hard time killing you, but the purple flare should be used primarily if something goes wrong with him and you aren't able to recover Oren from the battlefield. We still don't know anything about his Titan power and how it works, so be careful. Losing either of you would be detrimental to humanity's ability to combat the Titans. Understood. We'll get it done, I said as I took the flare gun and its holster and wrapped it around my waist. Look, I know that I've been very mysterious about my powers and everything. Pixis raised his hand up to stop me. Look, I don't need any explanations at this point. We've got enough to worry about. Just close that hole and then you can tell me over a cold beer. Maybe that will help me understand this crazy day. Hey, we'll see, I responded, but then took the gray backpack off of my back and handed it to him. Watch over this for me while I'm down there, and please, don't let anyone open it. Pixis took the backpack and slung it over his shoulder. Will do. Nobody will touch this other than me. You have my promise as a man, Pixis said before turning and walking away. Watch for the green flare. See you on the other side, Pixis said over his shoulder. Walking back over to Oren, I could see him staring out at the crowd of soldiers that had formed on the opposite end of the city, so now we wait. Yeah. I say we got about another half hour before that flare gets fired, I said, looking at the young soldier next to me. So what's the real reason you chose me over the elite squad? Oren rubbed the back of his head as he looked up at me sheepishly. To be honest, one reason is because I wanted to see you in action. But then his expression turned serious. And I wanted to prove that I didn't need to be babysat by her. By her, you mean Mikasa? I asked. Yeah, she constantly feels that she needs to watch over me like I'm some sort of child. Can you blame her? You were killed during the early phases of the battle? But this has been going on long before we joined the military. I'm like some lost puppy that needs protection at all times. She does hold a very protective attitude towards why I mean then? Of course, it wouldn't hurt her to tone down her protective nature, but you must also realize that it's her way of conveying her feelings. What do you mean? Based on the way she talks and treats people that aren't close to her, Mikasa must have lost someone very close to her when she was younger. Protecting those close to her, by any means that she sees fit, must be your way of expressing how much she cares about you. Oren remained quiet after those words left my mouth. Did he never truly think of why Mikasa was the way she was? But then again, I'm pretty sure almost everyone his age doesn't think everything through before taking action. Out of the corner of my eye I saw a trail of green smoke fly up into the air. That was much faster than I thought. I commented before turning to Oren. Ready? Taking a deep breath, Oren nodded his head. Ready. Then follow my lead, I said before jumping off the edge of the wall and into trust. XXXXX Pixis walked across the top of the wall, a gray backpack on his back, when a green flare sprung up from the clump of soldiers on the far side of the wall. They finished earlier than expected. Men could be seen dangling from the side of the wall as Titans desperately tried to snatch them. Halfway to the large group of soldiers was the elite team that would have been deployed if Oren so deemed it. As he approached them, Mikasa was the first to approach and salute. When will we be deployed, sir? You, as well as everyone else, are to return to the main battle group until further notice, Pixis said, earning salutes from his 3 most experienced soldiers, but a frown from Mikasa. Is the operation on hold? No, an alternative course of action has been taken. Now return to the main battle group. The other soldiers followed behind Pixis, but Mikasa looked confused at her commander's words. Alternative? What alternative is he talking about? Mikasa thought as she looked in the direction where they should have been deploying. The distance was great, so she was unable to see if Eren was still there or not, but Mikasa could feel that something was off. Catching up to the group just as they made it to Armin and several other soldiers, Mikasa stepped in front of Pixis and saluted him. "Sir, if I may ask, what is this alternative plan?" Armin looked at Mikasa with confusion before turning to Pixis. "Alternative plan? What alternative plan?" The elder commander furrowed his brow at the bold action of the female soldier. "I knew she's protective of Eren, if the situation earlier with Kits was any indication, but this is truly something else. That information is classified to the commander and Private Jaeger. You're overstepping new boundaries, trainee. Stand down," Riko said with authority, not especially liking the way Mikasa was blatantly disregarding their superior's orders, even if she was slightly frustrated at not knowing what was going on. But Mikasa stood her ground. Still holding her salute, she pressed her question. "Sir, I must insist, what is this alternative course of action?" "I said to stand down." Riko began to shout, but Pixis placed a hand on her shoulder. Now, no need to shout," Pixis said calmly, making Riko straighten her glasses and nod. "You must be extremely protective of that young man. To go so far as to defy the orders of a superior and ask for classified information." Now face to face, the elder commander frowned at the revelation of her loyalty. "This alternative plan has a much higher probability of succeeding than our original plan. So, if you wish for the safety of your friend, then I suggest you fall in line, because if you go to him now, then you're only going to hurt his chances of survival. Do I make myself clear?" After a moment of pause, Mikasa began to grind her teeth together in frustration. "Sir, yes sir." "Good, now return to the main battle group. The only thing we can do now is wait." XXXXX. I can't believe you can run down walls," Eren shouted in excitement as I ran across a line of roofs. "How in the world can someone do that?" I remained quiet, letting his mind wander on the marvels of what he has seen. He's not like Pixis, who saw my abilities and very quickly began to see if they could be applied to the battle. But it must be noted that Eren doesn't hold the wisdom that comes with old age as well. Strayed Titan at R11. Eren looked over and saw the Strayed Titan. Grinning, he began to pull out his swords. "I can take care of." "Leave it. We've got a mission to complete, but killing a single Titan won't have an impact on the outcome of this battle. Keep moving." Frowning, Eren followed me until we stopped on top of the building overlooking the massive boulder. "Okay, do your thing." Breathing in deeply, Eren brought his thumb up to his mouth before jumping off the side of the building. In a burst of steam, the Titan killing machine from before exploded onto the street. "So this what happens when he turns into a Titan," I thought as he stood up, his head level with my body and back facing me. From my clone's memories, he was driven completely off of rage. Let's hope he can learn to control this new power in such a short amount of time. Eren turned to me and stood stock still, staring at me as if he had been caught doing something he wasn't supposed to. "Eren?" As if on K, the young soldier let out of a loud roar, making me take a step away from him. Before I knew it, Eren sent a punch towards where I stood, but the only thing his fist caught was the top of the building. Landing a short distance away, I corrected myself and looked at where the heated Titan as he pulled his arm out of the building. As expected. You can't think properly while in that state, and you let your emotions control your thoughts, losing all logical reasoning. As quickly as he could, Eren swiped his arm across the top of the roof, destroying everything in his path. Futon. Kuikasoraisu. With a quick swipe of my arm, a single blade of wind burst out from in front of me. The blade connected with Eren's arm, slicing straight through the appendage at the elbow and sending the lifeless limb flying past me. Screaming in a mix of agony and annoyance, the raging Titan took a step back towards the boulder. "You know, Eren, I had faith in you. Faith that you could control this power. It seems my faith was misplaced." Only a roar was given to me in response. The shout shook the ground and vibrated the windows in the building around us until they cracked. Fire began to wrap itself around my hand until it was glowing brightly. "It seems my words aren't getting to you." Shooting forward, I jumped towards the hulking beast that was Eren, but he saw it coming and moved to swipe me out of the way with his arm that had not been cut off. The back of his hand connected, but almost immediately my clone popped away in a puff of smoke. "Time to wake up and remember what you're fighting for, Kanton, Moru Tenohira." Now on the back of Eren, I shoved my blazing hand into the back of his neck. XXXXX. It seems that there has been a problem with the mission, Pixis said as he watched a yellow flare fly up into the air. "Hopefully it's nothing more than a temporary delay." The elder commander watched as some of the Titans near the wall turned and began making their way in the direction of the yellow flare. "I can only hope Naruto doesn't destroy most of the city before the mission's end." "Did you hear that roar? Something's going on over there and it's not good," Armin stated in worry. "Do you think it would be wise to send reinforcements?" Riko asked. "You would only jeopardize the mission if a team were sent in to assist. No, we shall wait and see if anything else comes up," Pixis said as he crossed his arms, content with continuing to watch as the yellow line of smoke in the air blew away. Rico's eyes narrowed slightly at this and turned to the city as well. Whatever Pixis came up with must be better than the plan that was hatched earlier. To risk possibly our only way of retaking trust. How much faith cloaked figure? I felt his power, whatever that was, but is he trustworthy? XXXXX. Useless, useless, useless. Ren sat in an empty room, surrounded by his father, mother, and Mikasa as he repeated these words over and over again to himself. I obtained the power to make a difference and I can't even control it. Why is it so hard to control? You were never meant to be a soldier, honey. Ren's mother said as she patted him on the back with a large smile. This life just isn't for you. Why not just join the military police where it's safe? Mikasa chimed in while his father remained silent. Only the best are given the option to join them. But how would I make a difference against the Titans if I'm a part of the military police? They are the furthest away from the fight. Ren asked the people that surrounded him. Because you're not a soldier. You were meant for great things, but a soldier was not one of them, his mother said. Maybe you're right, maybe I'm going about this all wrong, Ren said as he fell to his knees. So that's it? You're just going to give up? A new voice suddenly said from the corners of the room. Naruto? The wall in front of Ren suddenly exploded in a burst of flames, sending debris and embers flying past the room's 4 occupants. A bright light was shining behind him, making him just a silhouette to everyone looking at him. What are you doing here? We've got a mission to complete and you sitting in this room isn't helping to accomplish it, Naruto said as he walked fully into the room. You were so full of fire before. Was it all just an act? Did you ever truly believe you could complete it? Because if not then you just gave everyone out their false hope. Every soldier up on that wall believed that you were their saving grace. Even Armin and Mikasa. Naruto said. Tell me, Jaeger, did you lie to us when you said you could do this? And no, I didn't lie. I can do this, everyone has put their trust in me, I won't back down now, Ren said as he stood up. Naruto grinned slightly before stepping to the side, indicating Ren to step through hole that was made in the wall. I won't, no, I can't fail now. XXXXX. I sat on the edge of the building across from the massive boulder that Ren was now sitting against. Watching as the Titan seemed to be having an internal struggle over something with a charred hole in the back of his neck, which had slowly healed. I wonder if my little talk got to him. Memories suddenly filled my head as one of my clones burst away from being destroyed by a Titan. Best hurry up or we may be swarmed. Pixis can't stall them forever. Several more of my clones popped away after being destroyed by the approaching Titans. Almost immediately Ren's eyes shot open with a glow of green beaming at its brims. A loud roar escaped his mouth, vibrating the roof beneath me, but I continued to watch Ren carefully. Slowly standing, Ren stared at me for a moment before turning and grabbing a hold of the massive rock. With all his might, the Titan shifter picked up the boulder until it was above his head. His green glowing eyes seemed to glance at me for a moment before looking forward once again. Looks like you finally found your wits. Fine, let's get moving. And with that we were off, albeit slowly. I wasn't even running. Just walking next to him on the roofs that lined the street he happened to be walking down. A Titan walked out in front of us, but I quickly moved to counter the new threat. Rinnegan. The red ball in my hand was quickly formed as I began my sprint towards the Titan. Said Titan attempted to grab me, outstretching its hand in a way that I have found all too familiar. Using the hook in the opposite hand, I spun my body, making the weapon spin until it hit its arm on its side. Quickly jumping off the roof of the building, I flew between the legs of the Titan by using the embedded hook as a pivot. Now behind the Titan I used my other hook to pull me closer before slamming the ball of chakra into the back of its neck. The explosion sent me flying down the street, but I landed on my feet. The dead Titan fell to the side and into a building with its head and neck missing from its body. Ren trudged through the smoke made from the blast and stood in front of me. If he was surprised by what just happened then he didn't show it. The boulder was extremely heavy and it looked like it was taking a lot of concentration just to keep it on his shoulders. I saw another Titan falling to the ground behind Ren with a clone standing on top of the building next to it. Not too many of them from what I can tell. If we keep moving at this pace we should be there in a couple of minutes. Pushing forward, I jumped onto the corner of the building that extended out into the plaza. 12 Titans? A reasonable number, but in order to get that rock to the gate all of them must be killed quickly. I sighed as I looked over my shoulder at Ren, who moved forward at a steady pace. My few remaining clones should be able to stop any Titan from approaching him from the rear for the time being, or at least distract them long enough to complete the mission. Which leaves me with ones in front of me. My muscles still ache from the earlier jutsu, but using a more destructive jutsu would cause collateral damage to trust. Sighing, I began to form seals in my hand until lightning and wind swirled around me, mixing together until my body looked to be twitching ever so slightly. Jinten. Boruto Saji. Time began to slow down as I jumped from the building and into the courtyard. Every step felt like I had run a mile, but everything around me looked to be moving at a snail's pace. My lungs quickly began to burn as I approached the first Titan, but the lightning around me made it easy for me to dispose of it. I swept past the titan, wind slicing around the neck along with lightning arcing over the same areas. As soon as the elemental chakra left my body, it slowed down to the same speed as everything else. By the time I reached the 7th titan, my breathing was becoming rasp and sweat was slowly falling down my face. With one last deep breath, I pushed forward, quickly passing the remaining 5 titans before coming to a sliding halt in front of the broken gate. I looked over my shoulder as the jutsu began to wear away. I watched as the wind and lightning began to slowly speed up faster than the world around the titans. Finally connecting with their targets, the blades of wind and the bolts of lightning shot straight through their bodies, from various angles, killing all 12 of them instantly. At the mouth of plaza stood Eren, watching as the titans fell to the ground in a quick fashion. While not as fast or as powerful as the Akuma no Iki, this should be enough to get the job done. When the titans were killed, Eren began his march towards the hole in the wall, eager to remove the heavy burden that was bearing down on his body. A pain suddenly shot through my body, coursing through every muscle like a searing hot pole had replaced all of my bones in my arms, legs, and chest. It would seem that the Biju's chakra was having a hard time keeping up with my body as healing was slow and tedious. Looking forward, I saw 3 more titans walking into the tunnel on the other side of the wall. One final push, moving through the hand signs, I stopped on the Tora sign before breathing in deeply. Kaden. Gokakyu no Jutsu. A massive fireball engulfed the tunnel, setting everything inside ablaze from the superheated flames that escaped my mouth. A man stood at the edge of a forest and a vast plains. The man had black hair and red eyes with a slashed forehead protector. A black cloak with red clouds hid his body from the world, but just by looking at him one could feel the power rolling off of in droves. Mist covered the area as another man, silver-haired with a single red eye, threw 3 kunai at the cloaked man. Said man easily dodged the weapons while forming seals in front of him. Kaden. Gokakyu no Jutsu. The silver-haired man washed fireball before exploding in a massive eruption that shook the area and cleared the air of the lingering mist. Feeling the rumble of Eren's steps behind me, I relinquished the fire escaping my lips and jumped backwards between his legs just as the boulder landed onto the ground where I once stood, sealing the gateway and stopping the flow of titans into trust. My eyesight was beginning to become hazy and my movements strained, but there was one last thing that needed to be done. Pulling out the flare gun, I loaded the green canister into the weapon and fired it up into the air. The 7 odd clones that were fighting on our rear popped away to remove what little strain that could be alleviated. I smiled as one particular memory flooded into my head along with the rest, but I moved it to the back of my mind for the time being. A loud thump could be heard as Eren, still in titan form, fell forwards onto the boulder. Sighing, I began crawling up the back of the titan until coming to its neck. Reeling in my hook until it was in my hand, the digging process began until I saw his back. A black mark could be seen on the back of his shirt from where my fire jutsu had hit him. Come on, hero. Let's get you out of there. Pulling him out of the body proved to be harder than it looked, but slowly I began making headway. Now fully removed from the titan, I sat Eren down on the crook of his titan's neck, propping him up so I could sit myself. I looked out over the courtyard, and saw the decaying bodies of the titans steaming up into the air. More titans were making their way towards us, but my body refused to move another inch. Several hundred years without the proper conditioning and maintenance will do that, as the needed training is required to use Jinten-based jutsu more frequently in a shorter period of time. The steam beneath us from Eren's decaying titan body was beginning to heat our backs and obscure my vision. Throwing Eren's arm over my shoulder, I jumped down from to the ground and found 2 titans entering the plaza. Grinding my teeth together, I lifted my free hand that wasn't holding Eren up in front of me to form a hand seal, but almost immediately I lost all feeling to my arm. I suppose I couldn't expect anything more. The Biju's chakra is trying its best to heal my body, but I'm pretty sure I've ripped and tore more than a few of my muscles. I'm surprised that I'm still standing. The titans grew closer with every passing second, but just as they were upon us, 2 shadows swiped past them. A second passed before the 2 titans fell to the ground with chunks removed from their necks. You 2 actually did it, a voice exclaimed from behind us. I turned and looked up to see 2 soldiers hanging from the wall. Mikasa and a silver-haired woman. You retook trust. I suppose we did. I thought as the feeling in one of my legs gave away. Eren and I fell to the ground as a crumpled mess. Mikasa, please take Eren. She didn't need to be told twice as she quickly made to his side and picked him up. The silver-haired woman then jumped down and threw my arm over her shoulder. What's wrong? I've lost all feeling in my left arm and right leg, I said as she shot her cables into the wall above. I'm afraid that I won't be of much help for a little while. The silver-haired woman chuckled softly before slowly walking up the side of the wall and away from the titans that had just entered the plaza. You've done more than enough for not being a soldier. Once we make it to the top of the wall, take a well-deserved rest and let us handle the rest. Smiling, I nodded weakly before looking up into the blue sky above. Life would be so much easier if we were just clouds and sky.